Chapter 46. Mai also noticed it, and he was also confused. Of course, he was sure that the two-thorn black wind in front of him were not the one he had killed last time. They would not provoke the thorn black wind, but they had been hunting for years, and they had fought with thorn black wind before. They knew about the thorn black wind's recovery ability. That kind of wound was made by himself, and it would take at least 50 or 60 days for the thorn black wind to fully recover. Besides, after such a long confrontation, Mai also felt that the two thorn black winds were more and more suspicious. They did not seem to want to fight to the death with them. Some of them were injured, and the two thorn black wind had many new wounds on their bodies. Fortunately, these two thorn black wind were not as crazy as the one they had met last time. But, where was the one they had met last time? Was the territory taken away by these two thorn black wind? It seems that they just want to stop us from going up the mountain, said Xiao. They can roar. Another middle-level totem warrior, who was about the same age as Mai, was confused. His hunting experience was no less than Mai's. He had met thorn black winds several times before, and heard a lot about them from the older generation warriors. He knew more about the habits of these ferocious beasts than Mai and the others. It's not just the habit of dominating the territory. As killers who are used to lurking in the dark, the thorn black wind seldom roars. Their signature is the sound of shaking thorns, not their roars. The warrior said quickly. Lang Jie and the others had heard the thorn black wind's roars on the mountainside, so they went down the mountain to help them. So many strange things were put together, and they had to think more. What were these two thorn black winds trying to do? In the twilight, the fast-moving shadows were a little blurry, and the shaking sound of the thorn black wind came from the bushes from time to time. When the thorn black wind was excited, the thorns on its body would shake, making a dense shaking sound. The sound was not loud, but because it was so dense, it was not hard to hear. In the dark night, the sound was like a death knell, and all the other animals around had already run away. Hearing the sound, everyone's hearts became heavier, and their backs were soaked with cold sweat. We can't wait any longer, we have to get rid of these two, Mai said in a deep voice. The sky was not completely dark yet, so they could still see some of the surrounding scenery. However, as night fell, the dark environment would be extremely unfavorable to them. If they didn't chase the two thorn black winds away and directly ran up the mountain, the two thorn black winds might chase after them. They couldn't let the two thorn black winds chase them all the way to their cave. Although the thorn black winds didn't like the environment on the mountain, it didn't mean that they wouldn't chase after them. Besides, there were two kids in the cave on the mountainside. Go! After a short rest, Mai ordered the whole team to fight the two deer with all their might. Xiaofan was dreaming again. After such a long time, he entered that dream again. However, this time, there was no night swallow or snowflakes in the dream. It was dark in the dream, but he could clearly feel a strong chill, as if something was hiding in the darkness. At the same time, there were some dense rattling sounds in the darkness, as if something was shaking. Xiaofan suddenly opened his eyes and sat up. He touched his forehead, which was covered with cold sweat. Feeling the chill on his back, Xiaofan shivered and moved closer to the bonfire. Looking at the burning situation of the wood in the bonfire, Xiaofan guessed that it had been a while since Lang Jie and the others left. It should be dark now. Why hadn't they come back yet? What had happened? Was anyone hurt? Thinking of the dream, Xiaofan took a deep breath and tried to calm down. The chill in the dream was much stronger than the night swallow last year. Xiaofan still felt his heart was beating fast when he woke up. He didn't know whether it was because of the fear or something else. Xiaofan looked to his side and found that Mao was leaning against the cave wall, sleeping soundly. Xiaofan had made a lot of noise when he got up. Warriors who went out hunting were usually very alert and would wake up at the slightest noise. However, Mao didn't wake up. Apparently, he was sleeping soundly, which should be the effect of the meat. Well, in this way, he wouldn't be spinning around in the cave like a top. Xiaofan felt that he had calmed down and his body was getting warmer. He added some wood to the bonfire and got up to walk to the entrance of the cave. With his previous experience, he knew that he wouldn't dream for no reason. He just didn't know what was out there. The boulder blocked the entrance of the cave tightly. It was hard for Xiaofan to push it away with his own strength. Xiaofan didn't plan to push the boulder away either. He didn't know how many dangers were out there. It would be safer with the boulder as a shield. The entrance of the cave was more than 50 meters away from where Xiaofan had been sleeping. Step by step, Xiaofan walked towards the entrance of the cave. His heart, which had just calmed down, began to beat fast again. The closer he got to the entrance, the stronger the sense of danger became. His hair was shivering all over, as if he was being pressed by a piece of ice. Xiaofan's steps became slower and slower as he approached the entrance of the cave. Even his breathing became careful, for fear of making too much noise. When he was about 10 meters away from the entrance of the cave, Xiaofan heard a series of close-knit clatter sounds. It sounded like it was ringing in his ears, but also like an illusion. A few pieces of wood had just been added to the bonfire in the cave. The fire was a little bigger, and the flame was dancing. It shone on people's shadows, and occasionally there was the crackling sound of the wood burning. However, Xiaofan didn't feel warm at all. Instead, he felt cold. Xiaofan opened his mouth and took a deep breath silently. After adjusting his mood, Xiaofan tightened his nerves and stepped back quickly and quietly. Coming to Mao's side, Xiaofan gave him a push. Although he was in a deep sleep, his subconsciousness was still there. When Xiaofan gave him a push, Mao quickly opened his eyes and put on a defensive posture. However, when he came to his senses and saw only Xiaofan in front of him, his face immediately turned pale. When he was about to say something, Xiaofan quickly covered Mao's mouth and glanced at the entrance of the cave. Mao was not a person who didn't understand the situation. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been allowed to follow the team. Seeing Xiaofan so nervous, he knew something was wrong at the entrance of the cave. Opening his mouth, Mao mouthed, "What's going on?" Xiaofan didn't have time to say anything. Looking at the top of the cave, he remembered that there was a secret vent above. He jumped up, stepped on the wall, and climbed to the top to search carefully. The cave wall was not smooth, and there were many protrusions, so it was not difficult to climb up. There were 3 vents. 2 of them were too small, and the last one was a little bigger, but it was blocked by a stone. Xiaofan tried hard to move the stone away, and signaled Mao below to catch it. Mao was a little anxious. He didn't know what was going on outside. Mai and the others hadn't come back yet, and Xiaofan didn't tell him what was going on. If it were any other time, he would have shouted, but now, after catching the stone, Mao carefully put it down, without making any sound. Almost at the same time, he heard a strange sound from the boulder at the entrance of the cave, as if something sharp was scratching on the stone. Mao's face changed. That scratching sound didn't sound like it was made by a human. The boulder at the entrance of the cave was moving. The evening wind blew in through the gap. The flames of the bonfire flickered even more fiercely. Mao saw his elongated shadow on the cave wall, which was distorted by the flickering flames. Mao had never encountered such a situation in his life. No matter how he used to show off in the tribe, or how he bragged about those thrilling hunting stories, he didn't know what kind of feeling it was until he actually encountered it. Except for the 2 of them, who had just awakened, no one else was there. No one would help them, and most of the creatures that got close to them were no match for them. When his grandfather, who was the chief, told him hunting stories, he once asked him, "Mao, do you know the feeling of desperation?" Mao didn't remember how he answered that question. He only remembered that he didn't take it seriously, because he didn't understand it at that time. But now, he knew. Chapter 47. As the boulder at the entrance of the cave continued to move, the clattering sound became faster and clearer. Hearing the sound, Mao had already guessed what kind of creature was moving the boulder outside the cave. Because of that, Mao's face turned pale, and his blood seemed to have frozen. He stood there stiffly, staring at the entrance of the cave. After checking the vent above, Xiaofan jumped down from above and patted Mao on the back. Mao was so scared that he almost jumped up. With his lips trembling, Mao didn't know what to say. After all, he and Xiaofan had just awakened their power not long ago. It was impossible for them to defeat the creature outside. The gap between their power was too big. No matter how brave they were, they couldn't deny the fact. Xiaofan put on his machete, and signaled Mao to go up. He had checked just now, and didn't see any dangerous creatures outside the vent. Even if there were, they had to go that way. It was better than staying in the cave and being eaten. The boulder at the entrance of the cave was moved farther and farther away. The night wind blew into the cave, and the flames of the bonfire were dancing. Mao didn't have time to think. He tried to calm himself down, and followed Xiaofan with his machete. Although the old hunters had told them that it was very dangerous at night in the forest, they had no other choice now. There was always a chance to escape from the vent above. But if they stayed here, they would die for nothing. They might be swallowed by the thorn-black wind before they could use all their power. The vent was barely big enough for Xiaofan and Mao to get out. If they were older, they wouldn't be able to get out. When Xiaofan and Mao went up, the boulder at the entrance of the cave had been moved away, and more than half of the entrance of the cave was exposed. The thorn-black wind was so excited that its clattering sound echoed in the cave. The whole cave was filled with the sound. The beasts in the forest were afraid of fire, but not all of them. Besides, the bonfire in the cave was not big. For the thorn-black wind, which was over 10 meters long, such a small fire was no threat at all. It seemed that the thorn-black wind didn't expect that there was no one in the cave. It was a bit confused, so it walked slowly. It stretched out its long, forked tongue and sensed the smell in the cave. Its eyes scanned the entire cave inch by inch like a radar. It felt that the burning bonfire was a bit of an eyesore, so it suddenly exerted force on its 4 limbs. Its whole body was like a black wind, and in the blink of an eye, it had already arrived at the bonfire and stepped on it. Bang! The thick horny scales blocked the burning sensation of the bonfire and put it out with a stomp. The cave instantly darkened. There was no one in the cave. The smell of the 4-fanged black boar's flesh was very strong, but it could still distinguish the scents of many humans, many of which it was very familiar with. The thorns on its body trembled as it recalled the last time it encountered these people. Da-da-da. Zhenxi's voice was even more hurried than before. Outside the vent, Xiaofan and Mao stood with their backs against the steep mountain wall. They were now hoping that the thorn-black wind would leave after it finished exploring the cave and didn't find anyone. When Mai and the others came back, they would go back into the cave. Holding his breath, Xiaofan listened carefully to the sounds in the cave. Except for the occasional slight clattering sound, they didn't know what was going on in the cave. They also heard the sound of the bonfire being stepped on. They tightened their bodies, just in case. After waiting for a while, they didn't hear any other sounds in the cave. They didn't know whether the thorn-black wind had left the cave or not. The night was getting darker. Although it was not completely dark, the light was dim. And because of the angle, they couldn't see clearly what was going on in the cave. While thinking, Xiaofan suddenly felt his scalp numb. A chill quickly spread along his spine, which made him shiver. He quickly moved 2 steps away from the vent. While moving, he pulled Mao, indicating that he should follow him and stay away from the vent. Mao moved his sight away from the vent. After 2 steps, he looked at Xiaofan. When he was about to make a gesture to Xiaofan, he suddenly felt a gust of wind behind his ear. The wind was so strong that it carried a cold killing intent. Mao felt that all the pores on the back of his neck were about to explode. Ding! The beast's claw was nailed to the mountain wall. The flying stone fragments hit Mao's body. His arm was scratched by a few sharp stones. Mao didn't care about the wound at all. He didn't have time to care about it. At the moment, he felt like his heart was being hammered. He didn't even notice when the beast's claw reached out from the vent. He didn't hear any sound at all. Everything happened too quickly, too quietly. If it wasn't for Xiaofan pulling him to the side, and if it wasn't for the fact that the vent wasn't big enough for the beast's claw to fully extend, Mao would have been nailed to the mountain wall by the claw, or even directly slapped to death by it. The claw that reached out from the vent was nailed to the mountain wall. When it pulled out, the sharp claw directly pried out a big piece of stone. When the claw closed, the stone was instantly crushed. The beast's claw didn't catch anyone, and when it pulled back, it also scratched off a piece of the vent. The vent that was only big enough for a child to pass through suddenly became twice as big. Not only that, the beast's claw seemed to want to continue expanding the vent. Obviously, the thorn-black wind already knew that Xiaofan and Mao were outside, and had its eyes on them. "Let's go." Xiaofan and Mao quickly ran away. Such a steep mountain wall was actually not that difficult for them. It wasn't completely dark yet, and they just needed to stay calm and not make any mistakes. One wrong step and they might fall down the mountain wall. With their physique and reflexes, they wouldn't fall to death, but it was very likely that they would be blocked by the thorn-black wind behind them. "Which way should we go?" Mao asked. Because of what happened just now, he had more trust in Xiaofan. After all, there were several times when Xiaofan had sensed danger before he realized anything. "Let's go up the mountain," Xiaofan said. This was also the question that Xiaofan had just thought about. Mai and the others should be at the foot of the mountain now. It was a good idea to ask them for help, but if they ran down the mountain, it was still a problem whether they could successfully get rid of the thorn-black wind behind them. That big guy's sense of smell was too sensitive, and Xiaofan didn't have the confidence to get rid of it directly. Besides, Mai and the others hadn't been able to go up the mountain smoothly, and he didn't know what the situation was like there. The situation at the foot of the mountain was unclear, so it was obviously not a good idea to go down now. There was another reason, which was just Xiaofan's guess. While running up the mountain, Xiaofan asked, "Is the thorn-black wind afraid of the cold?" Xiaofan's question reminded Mao of something. "I heard that the thorn-black wind seldom goes up the mountain, and likes to stay in warm and humid places." While speaking, Mao also understood Xiaofan's meaning. The temperature would drop a lot as they went up the mountain. The temperature difference between the top and the bottom of the mountain was huge. The place near the top was covered with snow, and the top was covered with ice and snow all year round, so there were not many dangerous creatures living up there. The real danger was the environment, which was very cold. As far as he knew, the thorn-black wind was very persistent about its prey, and had a very sensitive sense of smell. Once it set its eyes on something, it wouldn't give up easily. Below was the territory of the thorn-black wind. It was still night, when the thorn-black wind was most active. Going down was like sending oneself to the mouth of the thorn-black wind. They would either freeze to death or be eaten. If Mao had to choose, he would rather go up the mountain, where there was at least a chance of survival. It would be better if the thorn-black wind behind them couldn't stand the cold environment and retreated. Behind them came the sound of rocks breaking, which meant that the vent was getting bigger and bigger. Among the sounds of rocks breaking, there was also a rapid shaking sound. The thorn-black wind seemed to be getting more and more agitated. In fact, the thorn-black wind could directly go out from the vent, and then catch up with them, but it didn't do that. Maybe it didn't think of that way, or maybe it didn't think that such a narrow vent was a big problem for it, so it didn't bother to take a detour. Or maybe, there were other reasons. When Xiaofan and Mao were running up the mountain, Mai and the others at the bottom of the mountain were also attacking, and the two thorn black winds were about to retreat. Mai was overjoyed, but soon after, his expression turned ugly. The sound coming from the mountainside was not loud, but it was very quiet now, and with Mai and the others' extraordinary hearing, they could naturally hear the sound of rocks breaking. Mai heard it, and so did the others. Their faces suddenly changed. "Is it from the other side of the cave?" Xiao said in surprise. "Oh no. Xian and the others are still in the cave." Lang Ga's hand holding the stone knife trembled, and the knife almost fell down. "Go up the mountain," Mai shouted. This time, the two thorn black winds, who were about to retreat, didn't stop them from running up the mountain. Without caring about anything else, Mai led the others and rushed to the cave on the mountainside. The sound of rocks breaking didn't last long, and soon it died down, which made Mai and the others even more worried. If there were sounds, they could still hope that the two kids were fine, but if the noise died down, it meant that the crisis was over, or, Mai didn't dare to think further, and just tried his best to rush there. When they finally arrived at the cave, their faces were all pale. With the strength of Xiaofan and Mao, it was not easy for them to move this huge rock. Even if they wanted to move it, they might not be able to move half of the cave. With their small bodies, they could go in and out freely through a small crack. Of course, it was not the two kids who moved it. Moreover, there were familiar claw marks on the huge rock. Seeing the huge rock that was moved away, and the obvious claw marks on it, Lang Ga's legs went soft, and he almost knelt on the ground. Mai didn't have time to get a torch, and rushed into the cave. But at this time, there was only a mess in the cave. The cold wind that poured in from the hole and the vent made their hearts feel cold. Plus equals plus. Let's go to bed early tonight. Chapter 48. Damn it. It's that guy from last time. It's him, it must be him. Those two at the foot of the mountain were also found by him. Combined with what they had seen at the foot of the mountain, they had guessed something. They had never thought that the one they had met last time would be so persistent. Before, they only knew that the thorn black wind was tough, but they had never thought that in order to attack them, it could find helpers. As the saying goes, it's easier to invite the devil than to send him away. The two helpers at the foot of the mountain would probably occupy this area. Last time, the thorn black wind would rather lose its territory to take revenge on them. I knew it. I knew it wouldn't give up easily. Xiao looked at the mess in the cave, and her voice was full of depression. During the last hunting trip, Hoodlum naturally followed Mai's team, together with another kid. They were all led by several intermediate totem warriors in the team. According to the old rules, if an intermediate totem warrior led a newcomer, Mai wouldn't say anything. The other teams all did the same. Later, when they were hunting in the basin, Hoodlum targeted a small thorn black wind that was alone. It was still daytime. Maybe the big one was sleeping in the pond, but the small one didn't. It was curious about the outside world, so it came out and chased a fox away from the pond. Hoodlum and the others saw it. Compared to the adult thorn black wind, the newborn thorn black wind was much easier to deal with. In the tribe, the newly awakened warriors would wear the trophies they had hunted in the previous year and compare them with each other during the snow festival ceremony. Although the shaman and the chief didn't include this rule in the ceremony, it had almost become a recognized practice. Hoodlum was satisfied to hunt a thorn black wind, even if it was a small one. That was where the problem came from. Hoodlum was about to make a move. With the help of a few other warriors, he managed to kill the small thorn black wind, but the big one came. That was the beginning of the trouble. The cub had been killed, and the murderer had been caught red-handed. The big thorn black wind went mad and chased after them like a madman. Several intermediate totem warriors who were protecting the cub could not fight against a crazy adult thorn black wind, so they hurriedly called for help. After injuring several people, they finally forced the big thorn black wind to retreat. Hoodlum did not take the baby thorn black wind's body away. If he did not leave the body behind, the big thorn black wind would continue to chase after them. The two people who were seriously injured during the last hunt were injured during that incident. If Mai and the others hadn't rushed over in time, those two people would probably have died. The reason why the few children who participated in the hunting last time, except for Mao, was that they were afraid of encountering similar situations again. Xiao Xian was an exception. Mai valued Xiao Xian's ability and hoped that Xiao Xian could adapt as soon as possible. In addition, Mai thought that Xiao Xian was more sensible and obedient, so he brought him along. Therefore, there were only 2 children in the whole hunting team this time. Unfortunately, both of them were in their hunting team. If something happened to them, one of them was the one who had awakened his power early, and the other one was also talented. He was the grandson of the chief, and the son of the team leader. If either of them died here, it would be a heavy blow to them. If both of them died here, they would be too ashamed to go back to the tribe, and they would not be able to answer to the chief and the shaman. It planned so much just for the 2 kids in our team. A warrior punched the mountain wall in frustration. Last time, they killed its cub, and this time, it killed the human cub. It would rather take the risk of losing its territory and lurk in the daytime. It even climbed up the mountains that it usually didn't set foot in. Sure enough, no ferocious beast could be underestimated. We shouldn't have taken this route. Mai regretted it now. He had underestimated the thorn black wind. There might be other unknown dangers in taking the new route, but if he had known this would happen, he would rather take the risk and take the new route. But now they had no time to regret. After checking all the traces, they divided into several groups and went up the mountain. But it was dark now, so it was not convenient to find people. They also had to guard against other threats. Xiao Xian and Mao almost used all their strength to run for their lives. For Mao, even with the totem power and enhanced vision, he still could not see the mountain path clearly at night. The 2 crescent moons were completely covered by the clouds in the sky, and it was pitch dark all around. Xiao Xian was in the front, and he let Mao follow him. At least, they could avoid some caverns and places that could easily get tripped. Stepping on footprints was a game that the kids in the tribe started to play when they were very young, especially the kids who lived in the mountains. The adults in their families even took it as an early training activity. It was not too difficult for them to step on the footprints in front of them. Now Mao was running with Xiao Xian, and even stepped directly on Xiao Xian's footprints. When Xiao Xian jumped, he jumped as well. However far Xiao Xian jumped, he jumped as well. When Xiao Xian turned to the left, he turned to the left as well. He could judge the terrain according to Xiao Xian's footsteps. This was a game that he had played since he was little, so it was not difficult for him to deal with it. If it was daytime, those footprints would only be the footprints of one person, and no traces of 2 people running would be found. Mao had many doubts in his mind. He did not know why Xiao Xian was so sensitive to danger, nor why he could tell where the caverns were in such a dark environment. The mountain was rugged, and there were many caverns. He could hear the sound of the thorn black wind stepping on the caverns behind him. It would sound every once in a while, and now it was much more frequent. Mao even suspected that Xiao Xian deliberately chose such places to run, just to trap the big guy behind him. And he had been running with Xiao Xian for so long, and he had not missed a single step. However, now was not the time to think about it. Xiao Xian kept running up the mountain. In his vision, it was not complete darkness, but a picture of different shades of gray. He could see where there were protruding stones, and where there were caverns, even if the ground was covered with a layer of snow. At this time, Xiaofan was really glad that he had such an ability. Otherwise, if he stumbled on a cavern, the thorn-black wind would have caught up with him. The snow under his feet was getting deeper and deeper, and it was almost knee-deep. The temperature was getting lower and lower, and snow was falling from the sky. Xiaofan felt that his face was frozen, and it was getting harder and harder to move forward. If it were not for the totem power, his limbs would have been frozen. But he could not stay like this forever. If he did not think of a solution now, it would be too late when he was really exhausted. He could not stay in such a cold environment for too long. Fortunately, the thorn-black wind behind him slowed down a lot. Obviously, it was not used to such a place of ice and snow. Even its famous stealth did not work. If he listened carefully, he could hear the sound of the thorn-black wind's footsteps in the snow behind him. The distance between them was getting wider and wider. Xiaofan did not run up the mountain anymore, but ran horizontally to other parts of the mountain. He had no choice. If he went up, he might be able to stop the thorn-black wind, but Xiaofan might also freeze to death there. Every time he went up a little, he could feel the temperature dropping again. Since the thorn-black wind had slowed down significantly here, Xiaofan would not take the risk to go up. Xiaofan let out a sigh of relief. As long as he ran for a little longer, he would probably be able to get rid of the thorn-black wind behind him. However, as soon as he let out a sigh of relief, Xiaofan realized that something was wrong. The thorn-black wind behind them suddenly sped up and rushed towards them. The distance between them was getting smaller and smaller. The thorn-black wind, who was chasing after it, found this kind of environment to be really annoying. It wanted to retreat. It was not only cold here, but also snowy, which made it want to sleep. There was no grass, no trees, and there were many pits. Sometimes, it would step into a big pit and fall into it. It was a big snow pit. It was so cold that it wanted to roll down the mountain immediately. The thorn-black wind scales were tightly stuck to its body, to better insulate it from the cold wind and snow. Its movement was also slowed down a lot because of the surrounding environment. It was not even half of its usual speed. It did not even dare to stick out its tongue. It did not expect these two human brats to be so cunning. They actually ran up the mountain. It was the first time it knew that there was such an annoying environment on the mountain. No wonder the other species did not go up the mountain. However, it was not willing to give up now. It was already very difficult for it to sense the smell here. If it let the two brats continue to run, it might lose them. No. It could not let them go. It could not do anything to the big ones, but it must bite the two brats to death, and then throw them in front of the big ones. Thinking of this, the hatred in its heart became more and more intense. Under the influence of agitation, even the closed scales on its body started to shake again. Sorry, there is still only one update tonight. There will be 2 updates on Saturday and Sunday. Chapter 49. Xiaofan could feel that the pursuer was getting closer and closer. Perhaps it had figured out that in such an environment, its usual stealth would not work at all. It was severely restricted, so it decided to give up on the last chase. After all, it would not benefit it at all if it continued to delay like this. The thorn-black wind was going all out. It burst out with its greatest power, staring at the 2 figures in front of it, and chased after them without caring about anything else. Every time it took a step, its big claws would pierce through the snow and nail on the frozen ground, making a bang 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 sound. Hearing the approaching footsteps, Mao's heart suddenly tightened, and he almost stepped on a protruding stone. Even if Xiaofan and Mao both sped up, and even if the thorn-black wind's speed was greatly reduced in such an environment, it was still the black wind, killer of the forest. At this moment, when it burst out with all its strength, Xiaofan and Mao could not be compared with it. A chill ran up his spine, and his hair stood on end. He did not know whether it was because of the cold wind or because of the chill on his back, but he felt like he was covered in an ice cave. "Get out of the way!" Xiaofan roared. Xiaofan and Mao avoided the huge figure that had already rushed over. For Mao, without Xiaofan's guidance, he could not move at all in such an environment. Under the attack of the dark night and the snow, he could not even see the huge figure clearly. If the thorn-black wind waved its claws at him, he had no confidence that he could dodge it safely. However, the thorn-black wind seemed to have realized that Xiaofan was the most important one between the two. After it missed the target, it turned its head to Xiaofan, and its hind legs kicked hard. The snow on the ground was wrapped by a strong wind, flying towards Mao, while the thorn-black wind rushed towards Xiaofan in the other direction. It knew that as long as it got rid of Xiaofan, the other little guy would not be a problem. Xiaofan skimmed across the snow-covered ground, and quickly pulled out a short spear from his back. He twisted his body, and the moment he landed on the ground, he used the force of the rotation to stab towards the thorn-black wind's eyes. The short spear was thrown out like a bullet towards the thorn-black wind's eyes. The thorn-black wind's reaction wasn't slow either. Although it didn't dodge the attack completely, it tilted its head and quickly closed its eyes with hard scales. The short spear did not manage to pierce through the thorn-black wind's eyes. It only managed to pierce through the corner of the eye, which was blocked by the hard scales. Even so, the sharp stone spear still managed to pierce through the corner of the eye. The eye was more or less affected, and blood started to ooze out of the corner of the eye. With its eyes injured, the thorn-black wind was even more furious. It did not expect that this little thing could hurt it so quickly. Xiaofan could not see the blood at the corner of the thorn-black wind's eyes. In his sight, there was a huge skeleton. Just now, he threw the spear at the thorn-black wind's eye sockets, but obviously, it did not manage to pierce the eye. Even though he could not see the thorn-black wind's eyes, Xiaofan could still feel the fierceness in its eyes. In order to share the pressure on Xiaofan's side, Mao also determined the direction of the thorn-black wind according to the sound, and threw a spear towards it. Unfortunately, the thick horny layer on the thorn-black wind's body and the thorns on its back formed a terrifying protective armor. The stone spear could not pierce through the tough protective layer at all. The relatively weaker parts were only a few parts on its head and a part on its tail. Mai had aimed at the part of the thorn-black wind's tail that was not covered by the thick thorns. That layer of protective scales alone might not be able to withstand the attack of a totem warrior. The thorn-black wind did not pay any attention to Mao at all. It was now staring at Xiaofan. Because of its anger, it swung its tail like a hammer hitting the ground, making cracking sounds, as if it was hitting the reinforced concrete floor. Snowflakes and broken stones on the ground flew everywhere. Dodging the beast's paw from above, Xiaofan pulled out his teeth knife to block the sharp claws coming from the side. Squeak, the sound of the sharp claws cutting through the teeth knife was heard. The sharp claws that could easily break the stones in the cave only left some shallow marks on the teeth knife. The knife was not a big deal, but Xiaofan felt that every part of his arm was burning with pain, as if his arm was about to fall apart. Without having time to check the wound on his arm, Xiaofan's calf muscles expanded and contracted rapidly, and he moved away from the original place to avoid facing the thorn-black wind directly. But the thorn-black wind was indeed a killer in the forest. It seemed that it had expected Xiaofan's possible reaction. When Xiaofan moved away, it whipped its tail at him. Xiaofan, who had just landed, could not dodge in time. He only had time to hold the knife in front of his chest, in case he was stabbed by the thorns on the thorn-black wind's tail. Bang! Xiaofan was sent flying by this powerful force. After landing on the ground, he still couldn't stop moving backwards. His chest was shaken by the impact. If it wasn't for the fact that the thorn-black wind's movement was greatly restricted in this environment, Xiaofan would have been long gone by the attack. This was the first time that Xiaofan had encountered such a dangerous situation since he came to this world. Hunting was dangerous, and he had already prepared for it. But he did not expect to encounter such a ferocious beast on his first hunting trip. No matter in terms of physical strength or speed, Xiaofan and Mao might not be able to compete with the weakened thorn black wind. The choice of survival was either you die, or I die. The only short spear he had on him had been thrown out. He had brought 3 with him, but he had used 2 on the way. Now, Xiaofan only had the teeth knife given to him by old Ku, and the 3 spearheads in the animal skin bag that he had not used yet. Mao did not stop making trouble for the thorn black wind, but the thorn black wind did not take him seriously. When he followed Xiaofan out of the cave, he brought 7 short spears with him. He had already thrown out 5 of them, and the 6th one almost hit the thorn black wind's eye. This time, the thorn black wind finally looked in that direction. Now was the time. This might be the only chance. At this moment, Xiaofan's eyes were full of killing intent, and the totem power in his body reached the peak. He suddenly stomped his feet and rushed out. However, Xiaofan did not rush in a straight line, but changed his direction with the help of the stone spear that was stuck in the ground. The thorn black wind did not expect that Xiaofan would change his attacking angle. It turned around and stared at the place where Xiaofan was standing just now. It waved its claws in that direction, but when it realized what happened, it found that the little man had dodged its claws. Maybe Xiaofan's strength was not as strong as Mai, who was a mid-level totem warrior, but with the help of the teeth knife, he used all his strength to stab the weakest part of the thorn black wind's head. The teeth knife broke the horny layer of the thorn black wind's head, and went straight into its head. However, even though he had chosen the weakest spot, and even though he had used all of his strength, the blade still hadn't completely penetrated the thorn black wind's body. Only 1/3 of the blade had gone in. If it had been Mai, of course the blade wouldn't have reached the hilt, and the thorn black wind would have died instantly. Unfortunately, the one holding the knife was Xiaofan, who had awakened his totem power only a month ago. Even so, the knife still caused a great deal of damage to the thorn black wind. Xiaofan wanted to use more strength to stab the knife deeper, but the thorn black wind's claws were already coming. Xiaofan did not even have time to pull the knife out. The knife was clamped tightly, and there was no time for him to use any strength. He could only dodge. Even so, Xiaofan's back was still scratched by the claws. Luckily, he dodged in time, and the wound was not too deep, so it was not fatal. If he was half a second slower or hesitated, he would have been killed. A sharp scream pierced through the snowfield, and the surrounding snowflakes were shaken away by the scream. The thorn black wind, who was stabbed in the head, roared out in pain. It wanted to push the knife away with its claws, but the place where the knife was stabbed was too delicate, and it felt a severe headache when it touched the knife. Its big claws were not flexible anymore, so it could not pull the knife out quickly. Instead, it made itself suffer from the pain that almost made it faint. Chapter 50. There were 3 spare spearheads in the animal skin bag. In fact, there was another big bag with more spearheads in the cave, but Xiaofan didn't have the time to bring that big bag with him when he was running for his life. Xiaofan put his hand out of the animal skin bag. Every stone spearhead in the bag was made by him, and he felt a sense of familiarity when he held them in his hand. It seemed that he could even clearly remember the trajectory and the effect of throwing them out. Old Ku told Xiaofan that every stone tool had its own unique vein, and an excellent stoneware master could clearly feel that vein, which was the power of creation. At that time, Xiaofan didn't understand that feeling, but now, he understood a little bit. The stone spear only had a head and no handle. It didn't matter, just use it. When the thorn black wind was anxiously waving its big claws, trying to pull out the knife from its head, Xiaofan used the spearhead as a dart, throwing it towards one of the thorn black wind's eyes. 2 darts in a row. One of the spear had slightly deviated, piercing the outline of the thorn black wind's eye, but the other dart went straight into its eye. Roar, another shrill roar, which was even more violent than the previous one, echoed in the snow, and the whole space seemed to be about to be torn apart. Xiaofan was thinking about whether he should throw the last spearhead in his hand towards its other eye, when he heard a cracking sound from afar, as if something was cracking. Hearing this, Xiaofan's heart skipped a beat, but the following roar confirmed his guess. Xiaofan felt that his head was about to explode, and he couldn't care less about the thorn black wind. "Follow me." Looking around, Xiaofan called Mao and ran towards a direction. That place was higher than the place where Xiaofan and the others were standing. When they ran there, they could clearly feel that the snow under their feet was deeper, and the wind was stronger. What the hell happened? Mao was confused. He wanted to ask Thorn Black Wind a few times, but the Thorn Black Wind was still some distance away from them. Judging from its voice, it seemed to be in great pain. It must have been severely injured. However, Xiaofan was obviously in a hurry to escape. However, as the cracking sounds came from afar, and the booming sounds became clearer and clearer, Mao felt more and more uneasy. Xiaofan felt the blood in his veins boiling. He had been fighting with the thorn black wind, and now there was an avalanche. He had never relaxed his tense nerves. Using the totem power in his body had exceeded his body's capacity, and he was extremely tired. In fact, the most important thing to do now was to find a place to rest and calm down the increasingly uncontrollable power. However, reality did not give him any time to rest. Because of the thorn black wind's roar, which made Xiaofan spit out blood, it also cracked the snow layer somewhere above them. The cracking sound Xiaofan heard came from that direction. As the snow layer cracked, huge snowflakes slid down, accumulating more and more. The avalanche swept down like a flood. The thorn black wind, which was about to pull out the sword on its head, also felt something. Its body froze, and it suddenly felt uneasy. It knew that a strange danger was quickly approaching the mountain. The trembling from the ground had spread from its feet to its whole body. Even though it was the dominant species in the basin, it could not wait to turn around and run away. Regardless of the sword on its head and the wound on its eyes, it could still sense the direction of the two little creatures. Should it go down the mountain? Or should it continue to chase them? Soon, the thorn black wind made up its mind. It directly ran towards Xiaofan and the others. Its intuition told it that if it followed the two little creatures, there should be a way to avoid them. Besides, it had chased them all the way here, and was even stabbed by the two little creatures. It was not willing to give up. It would be better if it could bite the two to death. Xiaofan did not have the time to pay attention to whether the thorn black wind was chasing them or not. He just wanted to hide behind the big rock, which was the only suitable place for him to hide in. The huge snowy body brought along a rumbling sound that caused the ground to tremble as it charged downwards with a ferocious momentum. Mao, who was following closely behind Xiaofan, felt that his body was getting more and more tired. However, the crisis at the moment forced him to keep going. Xiaofan had fought with the thorn black wind in the front, so he had consumed more energy. Since Xiaofan did not slow down, Mao could not slow down either. He gritted his teeth and kept following. The rumbling sound was getting closer and closer, making Mao feel as if the whole mountain was about to collapse. He did not know what it was, but the huge pressure made it difficult for him to breathe. Closer. It was getting closer. Xiaofan rushed to the big rock, which was connected to the mountain. In Xiaofan's opinion, it was the most stable place in this area. Hold the rock tight, and keep your mouth shut. Hold your breath later. Xiaofan said to Mao. The huge snowflakes were getting closer, and so was the thorn black wind behind them. Seeing the thorn black wind chasing them, Xiaofan wanted to curse, but he could not leave here. If he left, there would be no suitable place to hide. At this time, Xiaofan kept praying in his heart, hoping that the avalanche would come soon and wash away this troublesome thing. The thorn-black wind also sped up, and was only dozens of meters away from the rock where Xiaofan and the others were hiding. The mist-like snow had already rolled over, and the big mouth with sharp teeth was also biting towards them. However, the big mouth was one step too late. Take a deep breath, hold the rock tight. Hearing the rumbling sound, Xiaofan closed his eyes. When the avalanche came, the thorn-black wind roared unwillingly, and Xiaofan even smelled the fishy smell coming from its mouth. Just as the thorn-black wind roared, it was drowned out by the rumbling sound of the avalanche. After that, there was only the sound of the avalanche that made people think that it was going to destroy the world. Even hiding behind the big rock, Xiaofan and Mao were still stuck in the snow for a while. After a long time, the rumbling sound gradually faded away, and the snow was all gone. Xiaofan pushed the snow away. The cold air poured into his lungs, bringing with it a cold tingling feeling, but Xiaofan could finally relax his tense nerves. The thorn-black wind was nowhere to be seen. Obviously, it had been washed away. Whether it was dead or not, at least, it was no longer a threat to Xiaofan and Mao. Are we safe for now? Mao was still in shock. He had never encountered such a thing. For now, yes. Hearing Xiaofan's words, Mao breathed a long sigh of relief. Just now. What was that? Mao asked after a while. His voice was still filled with fear. Avalanche. Avalanche? Mao searched in his mind, but he had never heard of this word. But he found a similar story in his memory. It was told to him by his grandpa chief a long, long time ago. But at that time, he did not find it exciting, and preferred to listen to stories about hunting ferocious beasts. Now that he had experienced it himself, he realized that sometimes, this kind of power was much more terrifying than ferocious beasts. For a moment, he even felt that the whole mountain was going to fall on him. They had escaped another disaster, but Xiaofan and Mao did not dare to run around. Who knew if there would be a second avalanche? If that happened, they would be doomed if they could not find a suitable place to hide. They also did not dare to sleep, for fear of other accidents. In this place, they might not be able to wake up if they fell asleep. After resting for a while, Xiaofan asked Mao about the thorn-black wind. Mao told him about the hunting experience last time. He had heard it from his father, and had not experienced it himself. But now, he had encountered the trouble caused by Hoodlum. Fuck. Xiaofan cursed in a low voice, go back and beat him to death. Chapter 51. There was nothing wrong with being cautious. After that, there was another avalanche, but it was not as powerful as before. Xiaofan did not plan to leave before dawn. He decided to wait until the sun came out. It was not convenient to move in the dark, and it was not easy to find the way. After being chased and dodging the avalanche for such a long time, all kinds of feelings came pouring out as soon as he relaxed. He was hungry and tired, but he still had to be vigilant, in case of any unexpected threats. Therefore, Xiaofan cursed Hoodlum in his heart several times. He had a piece of meat with him, but he dropped it when he was running. He touched his body and the animal skin bag, and found a spearhead and a gourd in it. The gourd was not big, and there was still some pig blood in it. Mai and the others put some grass juice in it to prevent the blood from coagulating. After drinking a mouthful, Xiaofan handed the gourd to Mao, who was even worse than him. Except for a few short spears and stone knives, he dropped everything else on the way. Even without the meat, a mouthful of the four-fanged wild boar's blood helped him recover some of his strength. Mao looked around, and asked Xiaofan, "Do you think Mai and the others will find us?" "I don't know. If they were in other places, such as the valley or the basin, or the forest they had passed through before, Mai and the others would probably find them by following the traces. But in this place, since they set foot on the ice and snow area, many traces were buried by the flying snow. Moreover, when they were chased by the thorn-black wind, Xiaofan ran horizontally along the horizontal line after reaching a certain height, and did not continue to go higher. The temperature at night was much lower than during the day. When they climbed over the mountain, it was during the day, and it was freezing, not to mention tonight. It was probably because he had consumed a lot of energy tonight. His body was absorbing the energy from the four-fanged wild boar's blood at a much faster rate. Even after taking 3 sips of the blood, the totemic power in his body never stopped circulating. There was no other way. If he stopped in this place, he would probably be frozen solid. He could only rely on his totemic power. Mao did not know how to talk to Xiaofan. After all, he did not like Xiaofan before, and after drinking the four-fanged wild boar's blood, he was a little sleepy. But the tense nerves and the endless cold wind drove away most of his sleepiness. Looking around, it was still pitch black. He could still vaguely see things close to him, but he couldn't see anything further. After hesitating for a while, Mao decided to ask Xiaofan why he could see clearly in such a dark environment. However, when he turned around, he saw Xiaofan drinking the pig's blood from the gourd. The 5th mouthful. Usually, Mai only let them drink 1 mouthful at a time, because they could not bear the energy contained in the pig's blood if they drank too much. Even when Mao himself was almost exhausted, he only drank 3 mouthfuls intermittently, and that was almost his limit. If there was too much external energy, and he could not control it, there would be chaos in his body. But now, Xiaofan did not seem to want to stop. It seemed that there would be a 6th mouthful later. Is it okay to drink so much? Mao asked. It's okay for now. Xiaofan felt that the energy brought by the pig's blood soon disappeared, and the tiredness that had just eased came back again. He could only drink 1 more mouthful. After repeating this several times, Xiaofan did not find any side effects, so he just followed his instinct and kept drinking. Mao only drank 3 mouthfuls of the four-fanged boar's blood, and Xiaofan drank the rest. When the pig's blood was finished, the sky began to glow. Mao looked at Xiaofan as if he was looking at a monster. He could not understand why this guy was not affected at all after drinking so much four-fanged boar's blood. On the contrary, he was getting more and more energetic. No one in the tribe would believe him if he told them that. Are we leaving now? Mao asked. The snow had stopped long ago, and as the sky gradually brightened, they could clearly feel the temperature rising. When the sun came out, they would not need to use the totem power anymore. Wait a little longer. Xiaofan looked at the sky and said. The clouds in the sky dispersed a little, and Xiaofan could see many sharp peaks in the vast sea of clouds. Those were the mountains in the distance. The peaks appeared and disappeared with the surging of the sea of clouds. Further away, there were even higher peaks, piercing into the blue sky. When the sun finally came out and shone on this snowy region, the color was no longer so cold. However, there were no trees in sight. There was only a large white wall of snow in front of them. Looking up, they would reach the peak of the mountain. The snow was knee-deep, and as far as his eyes could see, it was all white. The heaven and the earth seemed to be one. Looking down, the world at the foot of the mountain seemed to be hidden in the fog, and he could not see through it. The scene in front of him made him feel like he was lost in an inaccessible white world. Those who were not strong-willed would probably shrink back. Here, it was even higher than the mountain that Mai took them to climb. That mountain was connected to the mountain range, and Xiaofan was looking at a place in the mountain range. Looking around, he could see the white peaks that stretched for thousands of miles. Where is this? Mao looked at the strange scenery in front of him and asked uneasily. He remembered the place they climbed, and even all the scenery around the mountain. He remembered it carefully in his mind, but now it was all strange in front of him. When they escaped, they did not feel that far away. Now, looking at it again, they found that they were in big trouble. It was impossible to stay here forever. Xiaofan decided to go down the mountain, at least to a warmer place. Xiaofan was still thinking about old Ku's saber. After old Ku gave him the saber, he held the saber in front of old Ku and assured him that he would take good care of the saber. But now, the saber was gone. Walking down the mountain, through the cloudy area, the scenery at the foot of the mountain gradually appeared. In this forest, there was no vegetation above, and the mountains were covered with snow all year round. But at the foot of the mountain, there was green grass, experiencing a short winter and a long summer. It was almost two different worlds. Xiaofan and Mao walked down the mountain for a while, and saw a big bump in the snow. The snow here was very thin, and was melting under Yangguang's feet. The protruding mass also revealed part of the scene under the snow, black scales. The exposed saber allowed Xiaofan to judge that it was the head of the thorn black wind. A ball of snow slid down along with the water, with some traces of red. Xiaofan looked over, and found that the saber, which had only pierced 1/3 of the head, had now pierced more than half of the head. There was some dried blood around the saber. The thorn-black wind scales, which were usually so majestic, were now all lying on the ground, and it did not move at all. Signaling Mao not to move, Xiaofan closed his eyes. When he opened them again, what he saw in front of him was a huge skeleton. Different from last night, the huge ferocious beast in front of him now had several broken bones, as if it had bumped into something. Even if it was still alive, the injury was not small. And its head was deeply pierced by the saber. If it were not for the saber, Xiaofan would have gone down the mountain without hesitation, and would not have tested whether the thorn-black wind was dead or alive. If it was still alive, even if Xiaofan had recovered his strength, the outcome would still be uncertain. Gathering the snow around, Xiaofan squeezed it into a hard snowball, and threw it at the saber. The saber trembled slightly, but the huge ferocious beast did not move at all. After several tests, Xiaofan finally confirmed that the ferocious beast, which was at the top of the food chain in the basin, was really dead. The computer was broken, so he took out an old one and made do with it. He opened a web page for a few minutes, and downloaded some software, but it stopped halfway. Chapter 52. In the Yinjiao tribe. Life in the tribe was calm and peaceful as usual. Early in the morning, old Ku threw a piece of meat with a bone in it to Caesar, then sat there with a stone tool and began to polish it. He looked the same as before, expressionless and quiet. However, people who knew him well could tell that old Ku had been a little absent-minded recently. Just look at the wooden box in the corner that was used to throw away waste. The leftover waste from failed polishing or peeling stone leaves were all thrown there. There was so much waste. It was not like old Ku's usual level. Caesar, who was lying next to him and gnawing on the bone, seemed to have lost some weight. It was not that old Ku was reluctant to feed him, but Caesar's appetite had been greatly reduced recently. Coupled with his lack of energy, he looked a little skinny. Caesar, who was slowly gnawing on the bone, twitched his ears and looked at the window. Soon, a figure jumped in from the outside. Before landing, he stretched out his finger and used the force to flip in the air, as if he was trying to avoid something on the ground. Gu landed steadily on the ground and looked around. By the window, there were still the traps that he had set up the last time he came here. Originally, it was to prevent something from popping up from the ground. However, after waiting for a long time, there was no movement at all. This was not right. Gu squatted on the ground and squinted his eyes to carefully scan the room, not even letting go of a small place. Caesar was still chewing on the bone in his mouth and looked at Gu. He did not understand why this person had to roll when he came in. After confirming that there were no other traps and that the traps were still the same as last time, Gu stood up. "Hey, old Ku, what's wrong with you recently?" Gu came to old Ku's side and took out a few pieces of meat and 2 stone cores of good quality from the animal skin bag. "My son is going hunting with us next time. Help him polish something." Old Ku ignored him and continued to work on the task at hand. However, Gu didn't mind. He knew that old Ku had heard him. He just put the things aside and dragged a stone stool over. He stared at the stone knife that old Ku was sharpening and said, "Xian and the others should be hunting at the first stronghold now. I wonder what that kid will bring back from his first hunt." Old Ku's hands paused for a moment. He did not say anything and continued polishing. Seeing old Ku like this, Gu was sure what old Ku was worried about. Old Ku did not have a wife or children. He was fine when he was young, but after he was injured and had to leave the hunting team, his temper became more and more eccentric. He gave people the impression that he was difficult to get along with. None of the children were close to him, and none of the people who came to learn stone crafting skills could persist. Finally, he had a Xian, and old Ku almost taught him as his own child. It was the first time their children had gone out hunting, so it was inevitable that the elders would be worried. Many people in the tribe went out with their children, so at least they could take care of each other. It was better to ask others to do it themselves. If old Ku was not injured, he would have taken Xian with him on the first hunt this year. "What a pity, don't worry. Xian is so smart, and he awakened early. I heard that the shaman thinks highly of him. He will be fine. You just wait and see when they come back and walk the path of glory. Didn't you give him that knife? He will be fine. That kid told us not to worry. Of course, he has confidence." At the same time, on the other side of the mountain far away from the tribe, Xiaofan, who was considered confident and reassured by Gu, was sighing in front of the teeth knife. After making sure that the thorn black wind was dead, Xiaofan pulled out the knife. It took him a lot of effort to pull it out, so the knife was stuck in the thorn black wind's skull. According to the marks on the ground and the injuries of the thorn black wind, Xiaofan speculated that the thorn black wind hit a big rock when it was pushed down the mountain by the avalanche. The rock rolled down the mountain, and the thorn black wind was buried here. The bones on its body should have been broken when it hit the rock, and the teeth knife on its head should have pierced deeper during the process. It could only be said that this thorn black wind was unlucky. If it was not Xiaofan who came with the hunting team this year, but anyone else in the tribe who had awakened this year, it would not have ended up like this. Without Xiaofan, the thorn black wind would have succeeded in its revenge in the cave. After pulling out the knife, Xiaofan found that the tip of the knife was broken, and there were several nicks on the blade. The body of the knife was full of scratches. Xiaofan wondered what kind of expression old Ku would have when he saw this knife when he went back. And Gu, he would probably cry in front of the knife. He had been eyeing the knife for a long time, and even touched it carefully, but now it was tortured by Xiaofan. While Xiaofan was staring at the knife and sighing, Mao was staring at the dead body of the thorn black wind in front of him in a daze. He did not expect that such a giant creature would die like this. In the stories he had heard, beginner totem warriors were far from enough to fight against such a powerful ferocious beast, unless it was a group battle, where a group of people could fight against one beast. That way, there would be some guarantee. Not to mention the newbies who had just awakened. Once they met such a powerful beast, the senior warriors would directly tell them, "Kids, stay away." Feeling the hard scales on the thorn black wind with his palm, Mao was very excited. Although he did not play a big role in this hunt, he was able to witness this special hunting and anti-hunting battle. It was inevitable that he would be excited. The invincible image of the thorn black wind in his heart had also been greatly reduced. Touch it again. Touch it again. Ah, look at its teeth, touch it again. He should be the first one in this generation in the tribe to touch the teeth of an adult thorn black wind. Just thinking about it made him excited. So, when Xiaoxian looked back, he saw that Mao was trying his best to open the jaw of the thorn black wind, and was stretching his neck to look inside. "Look at your ass." Xiaoxian rushed over and lifted his leg to kick Mao to the side. "Aren't you fucking afraid that it will bite you to death again? Didn't you say it was already dead?" Mao patted the snow off his body, and did not care about Xiaoxian's kick. He continued to stare at the thorn black wind passionately. People in the tribe always had a passion for such a powerful beast, which Xiaoxian could not understand. "Do you believe me just because I said so? What if I was wrong? Didn't you see me trembling when I pulled out the knife? Didn't you see me standing so far away when I pulled out the knife?" Although Xiaoxian was sure that the thorn black wind was dead, there were too many inexplicable factors in this world. The thorn black wind was a strange species, so it was better to be cautious. The chopped head could still bite people. Who knew if the thorn black wind would have other similar behaviors? As soon as he finished speaking, Xiaoxian and Mao both heard the sound of a wooden whistle. The whistle was a little far away, but judging from the rhythm, they were sure it was from their hunting group. Xiaoxian's face suddenly lit up. He raised his hand without the knife, put his thumb and forefinger in his mouth, and blew the whistle. Different rhythms of the whistles in the tribe meant different meanings. Xiaoxian knew all this, and all the warriors who went out for hunting had to know it. Seeing Xiaoxian blow the whistle with his fingers, Mao also tried to do the same. Unfortunately, he could not make a sound even though his saliva was dry. It was Lang Jie, Ong and the others who came to find them. When they saw that Xiaoxian and Mao were both safe and sound, Lang Jie almost cried out with his bloodshot eyes. But soon, when they saw the huge body lying on the ground, they lost their footing. The snow had melted, and the killer in the dark that frightened them was lying on the ground quietly, without any signs of life. Although there was a problem with the computer, the second update would still be released. If you did not update it, you would be embarrassed to ask for a vote. The new week's ranking is around the corner. If you have a vote, please vote for me. Chen Ci thanked them. Chapter 53. What? What is that? Lang Jie clenched the long spear in his hand, and pointed at that direction with trembling fingers. Ong and the others, who were one step behind Lang Jie, also swallowed their saliva. Although they had guessed it in their hearts, it was too unbelievable for them to believe, and they even doubted if they were dreaming. Yesterday, when they arrived at the cave and saw the mess in the cave, many of them had mentally prepared themselves that they would never see these two kids again. They stayed up all night searching for them. At first, they could still find some traces, such as the things that Xiaoxian and Mao dropped. But after they entered the snow region, it was difficult to find any more traces, and they could only try their luck. When they found this place, they were already out of the hunting range of their hunting group. At the foot of the mountain, they met another hunting group, and the two hunting groups searched together. The longer they waited, the heavier their hearts became. In this forest, it was too difficult for cubs to survive, no matter if they were human or ferocious beasts. Now, seeing that Xiaoxian and Mao were both safe and sound, Lang Jie and the others were naturally happy. This was beyond their expectations, because there were too few people who could escape from the thorn black wind. But when they saw the big guy lying there motionlessly, they felt like they were in a dream. Is it really dead? There is such a big hole on its head, and there is so much blood. It should be dead, right? After poking it several times with the long spear, Lang Jie and the others became bolder, and had the same reaction as Mao. Now, they had no time to care about Xiaoxian and Mao, and they all surrounded the thorn black wind, touching here and there, and exclaiming while poking. It is really the one we saw last time, the part on its tail is not fully grown yet. Its skin is so thick, look at the thorns. Hiss, I can't pull it off. Xian, help me hold the stone spear. Hey, I don't believe. The thorns are so hard, if my cut the thorns on its tail last time, he might not be able to hurt its tail like this. Look at its claws, so sharp, tut tut. Xiaoxian stood aside and felt a headache when he saw these people's reactions. He thought that they would have a happy reunion scene with tears in their eyes, but in the blink of an eye, he and Mao were thrown aside. Luckily, Lang Jie knew that he had to inform the others at the foot of the mountain, so he ran down the mountain and used a wooden whistle to send a message to the others. After they found Xiaoxian and Mao, they planned to bring them down the mountain to meet up with the others. But now that they had the thorn black wind, they changed their mind and asked the others to come up. It would be a waste to leave this big guy here, and bringing it back might even boost their morale. The competition between the two hunting groups in the tribe was not small. Every time they went back, they had to show off their harvests. This big guy was perfect to bring back. When Mai and the others arrived, Lang Jie was touching one of the thorn black wind's big claws. Just like when Lang Jie and the others saw the thorn black wind, the others all opened their eyes wide, as if they were dumbfounded. Then, as Xiaoxian expected, they all gathered around. Are you hurt? Mai came over and looked at Xiaoxian and Mao, feeling relieved. I'm fine. Xiaoxian moved his arms and legs, and even jumped a little. In fact, he had broken his ribs and arms last night, but it was not serious, and he had recovered a lot. Maybe it was because of the totem power. After confirming that Xiaoxian and Mao were really fine, Mai finally felt relieved. Under the questioning of the others, Xiaoxian briefly told them what happened last night. Mao added from the side. He had not calmed down yet. Perhaps it was because he finally saw the big group and felt relaxed, so he talked a lot. He talked a lot and talked a lot about his experience to the others. Xiaoxian did not mention that he could see the skeleton, but only said that his vision was a little better than others at night. And, from the beginning to the end, luck played a big part in this. There was another member of the hunting group who came with Mai. After hearing Xiaoxian's story, he sighed, so it was you guys who made the noise on the mountain last night. Last night, the other hunting group also heard the rumbling noise on the mountain, but they were still a little far away, so they did not worry about being affected by the torrent of snow. They also did not think of coming over to take a look. After all, no one could survive that kind of noise. The leader of the other hunting group looked at Mai enviously. He could already foresee what kind of noise Mai's group would cause in the tribe on their way back. It was impossible to leave the thorn black wind here forever. Like other prey, they had to cut it open first. According to the rules of the hunting team, Xiaoxian should be the one to wield the blade since it was his prey. However, Xiaoxian did not have the ability to wield the blade yet. The thorn black wind's hard scales were too thick. Even if there were no thorns on its abdomen, it was still difficult for Xiaoxian to wield the blade. So, Xiaoxian only cut it a few times under the guidance of Mai and the others, and then Mai would cut it open. If it was a prey that was hunted by the hunting group together, the internal organs would be distributed by the leader of the hunting group. Everyone would get some. As for how they would exchange after the distribution, the leader would not care. As for the meat other than the internal organs, it would be distributed later. However, the thorn black wind was hunted by Xiaoxian and Mao. Even if they were lucky, it was still their prey. So, all the internal organs would belong to Xiaoxian. If the others wanted some, they would have to negotiate with Xiaoxian. After the internal organs were cut open, Mai and the others said goodbye to the other hunting group, and dragged the thorn black wind back together. At the place where the hunting group climbed the mountain yesterday, there was a big cave near the top of the mountain. Processed prey was stored in the cave. The temperature was lower there, so the meat could be stored for a longer time. Moreover, prey like the thorn black wind and the four-fanged wild boar would rot slower. That was one of the reasons why warriors preferred higher-level preys. So, in every stronghold, there would be 2 caves. One was for resting, and most of them were located on the mountainside. The other one was for storing food, and most of them were located near the top of the mountain, which was covered with snow all year round. After all, the hunting would last for almost 20 days. After dragging the thorn black wind back to the cave where they stored food, the group went to the mountainside. My plan to find another cave for resting, as the original one was no longer suitable. My Xian, you are finally back. The 5 people who stayed in the original cave were very happy to see Xiaofan and Mao come back safely, but they had other things to report. After you left yesterday, I heard the roars of thorn black winds at the foot of the mountain. There were 2 of them. I went to check, and they were the ones who stopped us. They were fighting for territory. I didn't dare to get too close, so I came back after watching for a while. Mai thought for a while, and asked the others to wait in the cave, while he went down the mountain with several middle-level totem warriors to check out the situation. After Xiaofan finished eating a piece of roasted meat, Mai came back in a hurry. With a happy face, he asked the others to go down the mountain to help. It turned out that the 2 thorn black winds were fighting fiercely for territory. One of them was defeated, and was almost torn to pieces. The other one didn't fare well either. Chunks of meat were bitten off from several parts of its body, and one of its hind legs was almost bitten off. When Mai and the others went there, the victorious thorn black wind was resting in the woods. The pond was a little far from where they fought, and its wounds were too serious. It probably wanted to rest in the woods for a couple of days, and then decide what to do next. Unexpectedly, Mai and the others went there, and killed it directly when it was weak. Do you think that last time when the other one was looking for help, did it know that these 2 would fight like this? Lang Jie asked. Xiaofan also thought that maybe, when the other one offered its territory to help, it really did think of that. If everything went well, it should be able to kill the kids in the hunting group, and then wait for the 2 at the foot of the mountain to fight for its territory. When one of them was defeated, and the other one was weak, it would come back to pick up the last harvest. In this way, it could not only take revenge, but also kill the other 2 of its kind, and expand its territory. No one knew the truth. After all, the 3 of them had been dragged to the cave where the hunting group stored food. Chapter 54. A herd of giant antler deer was walking along the meadow beside the stream. Beside them, there were some predators, which made them feel uneasy. Hundreds of meters away from the herd, Xiaofan was hiding in a tall tree, under the cover of the dense branches. His eyes were looking at the direction of the herd through the gaps of the leaves. It was the 5th day of hunting. My plan to lead the hunting team to the second location, since they had almost finished their hunting in the first location. The second location was on the other side of the basin. They had to go through the basin and then climb over the mountains to get there. Mai didn't plan to go straight through, because he had Xiaofan and Mao with him. Instead, he walked along the edge. Although the route was longer, it was less dangerous than going in a straight line. On the way, the hunting team saw a herd of giant antler deer and wolves. Mai asked everyone to hide first, and then asked Xiaofan to check the wolves in the forest. Xiaofan also had a wolf. Mai was worried that Xiaofan had never seen a real wolf. Caesar was no longer a real wolf in the eyes of many warriors. He couldn't let Xiaofan think that Caesar was just a silly wolf. In fact, Mai worried too much. Xiaofan certainly knew what wolves in the wild looked like. Otherwise, he wouldn't have treated Caesar as a dog. However, the wolves here were much stronger than the ones Xiaofan had seen in his last life. They were more muscular, and more lethal. Judging from their heads and jaws, they had a stronger bite force. In their diet, there were many prey that were several times bigger than them. Now, the wolves were just wandering around. Before they took action, they would do a risk assessment. They will avoid those with big horns. Look, that's it. Mai pointed out to Xiaoxian. In the herd of giant antler deer, there were many bucks with big antlers, and a few of them had special antlers. Unlike other deer, those antlers didn't spread out to the sides of their heads, but spread out to the back, almost wrapping themselves up. Those kinds of deer were very difficult to deal with. Xiaoxian had seen such antlers in the tribe before. Some people wore antlers like that during sacrifices. It's about to begin. Lang Jie said in a low voice from the tree nearby. He sounded very excited. In fact, Lang Jie was very excited every time he saw the wolves hunting. There were many things worth learning from the wolves' fighting style and hunting skills. The best way to deal with gregarious prey like the giant antler deer is to make them run, Mai said in a low voice. Xiaoxian looked over and saw that the wolves, who had been watching from afar, had gradually dispersed and were slowly approaching the giant antler deer herd. A few wolves even tried to intimidate the giant antler deer on the side. Because of the approach of the wolves, the giant antler deer herd began to panic. Soon, under the threat of the wolves, they began to run, and some of them left the herd and fled in different directions. The wolves scattered and ran, looking for suitable prey among the fleeing giant antler deer. The young deer are protected in the middle of the herd, and there are strong individuals protecting them. Generally speaking, the wolves rarely attack them. As for those who fled in panic, the wolves can quickly find the injured, weak or old ones. Once they find such a deer, the other wolves in the pack will give up chasing other deer and turn to this side, Mai said to Xiaoxian, pointing at the wolves that began to run. After a pause, he added, so, even if you are injured, don't show any weakness in front of them. Also, don't let the wolves go around to your back. It's very dangerous. Before Xiaoxian could tell which deer were injured or old, he saw a wolf speed up and chase a deer. Soon, 6 or 7 wolves joined in the chase. Gradually, more and more wolves joined in. The largest and strongest wolf in the pack should be the alpha wolf of the pack. It was also the first wolf to step forward when the attack was launched. However, it was a pity that because of the help of several other deer, their prey escaped. They won't give up if they don't catch their prey, Lang Jie said with certainty. On the other side, after the failure of the wolf pack, they quickly gathered together. Probably because they didn't succeed this time, there was a commotion in the pack, but it was quickly suppressed by the alpha wolf. The alpha wolf let out a howl. Xiaoxian thought that it should be reorganizing the wolves' morale. Soon, the wolves attacked the giant antler deer herd again. A wolf stared at an old giant antler deer, and the other wolves quickly joined in. This time, they learned their lesson and drove the deer to the open space, separating it from the other deer, and leaving it in a helpless situation. That kind of crazy chase, even from so far away, even if he was mentally prepared, Xiaoxian was still frightened. Perhaps for the prey, the most terrifying thing was to see such a well-planned predator with a ferocious look, chasing after it in groups. The alpha wolf in the front was very fast. When it got close to the deer, it suddenly jumped up, opened its mouth, and bit the prey with its sharp teeth. Its body, which was bigger than the other wolves, directly bumped into the deer. Although the old giant antler deer was several times bigger than the alpha wolf, it staggered and almost fell after being bitten and bumped by the alpha wolf. This was just the beginning. After the alpha wolf, the other members of the pack quickly rushed to bite the prey. Their teeth pierced through the deer's skin and into its muscles. The giant antler deer, which was surrounded by wolves, slowed down and then fell down until it couldn't move and died. A lone wolf might not be much of a threat, but when dozens of such terrifying predators gathered together, it was dangerous. It was because of this hunting method that they were able to deter most of the predators in this area. Sometimes, I'd rather meet ferocious beasts like the thorn black wind than face those guys. Someone in the hunting group said. Luckily, the thorn black wind likes to move alone. Even if they are temporarily united, they won't fight that hard. They like to live alone, and didn't like to cooperate. It was already rare for the two thorn black winds to cooperate with each other, but they would never fight against the hunting group together. By the way, I still haven't found where the pack of wolves hid the pups. Lang Jie looked around and said. It was a coincidence that he found Caesar, and Caesar was the only pup in the pack. Many animals living in groups would protect their pups well, like the giant antler deer over there, and the wolves on the other side who were ready to eat their prey. But like the thorn black wind, no matter how arrogant the adults were, if they didn't take care of their pups, the pups would become the food of other ferocious beasts. Even without hoodlum, there might be other predators, such as tigers, leopards, and wolves. After all, in the world of wild beasts, the injured and the old are the best targets, especially the pups. Mai said. Under the pond where the thorn black wind that lost its pup lived, there were also countless skeletons of animals, big ones, small ones, old ones, and young ones. The world in the forest was so cruel, full of killing. Grow up quickly. Xiao looked at Xiaoxian and Mao, and said with a smile. Packing up the equipment, the hunting group continued to the second location. While running, Xiaoxian jumped on a tree trunk, and looked back at the pack of wolves that were eating. The strong alpha wolf was howling, and fiercely biting the other wolves that came to eat their prey. It was defending its ruling position in the family in this way. When the other wolves were not bitten by the alpha wolf, they would quickly eat their prey, as if the prey would be gone if they were one step slower. In contrast, what was Caesar, who was raised like a dog since he was little, doing now? Slowly gnawing on the bones? My computer from a few years ago crashed after I opened a web page for a few minutes. I almost fell asleep because of the lag. Chapter 55. The weak ones in the forest were the most vulnerable to attacks, so Xiaoxian had been paying attention to the surroundings. He was just an underage kid, and in the eyes of the beasts and ferocious beasts, he was one of the two weakest in the team. When they crossed the basin, it was almost evening. Xiaoxian thought that there would be a cave for them to rest in. After all, the rule of the hunting team was not to hunt at night, and it was too dangerous to stay outside. Without a cave to rest in, they would feel insecure. To Xiaoxian's surprise, the cave of the second hunting ground was not on this side. The second hunting ground was on the other side of the mountain, but Xiaoxian raised his head and looked at the mountain. He could not see the top of the mountain, nor the border. It was too difficult to climb over. Even with the strong strength of a totem warrior, he might not be able to climb over in a day, not to mention it was already late. In the forest near the foot of the mountain, there were already many shining eyes staring at them. The hunting team led by Mai did not stop there, but kept going up the mountain. There was indeed a cave near the mountainside. It was a big cave, but it was not formed naturally, nor was it dug by the people in the tribe. It was dug out by some kind of creature. To be exact, it was actually a passage. Every time the hunting team came here, they would enter from here. They could walk to the other side of the mountain, and directly go through the mountain. On the wall near the entrance of the cave, there were many carved words. At the end, Xiaoxian saw Mai's name. Every hunting team leader would write his name on the wall when he passed through here. So, all the names on the wall were written by the previous hunting team leaders. When Mai could no longer lead the team, and a new hunting team leader was selected, the new hunting team leader would also write his name on the wall when he came here. In their eyes, this was a symbol of honor. Before entering the cave, the hunting team would hold a small ceremony to thank the ancestors who had opened up this hunting route. Mai put down the long spear in his hand by his feet, and knelt down on one knee, with his palms facing inward and his hands crossed in front of his forehead. He kowtowed to the wall full of names. To our ancestors. To you. Xiaoxian followed the other hunting team members and bowed to show his gratitude. It was said that the route taken by each hunting group was taken by their ancestors. A long time ago, when the tribe was short of manpower, there were not so many hunting groups. Every time they went out to hunt, they would change their routes. This time, they would take this route, next time, they would go that route, and the next time, they would change the route again. Later on, when there were more people in the tribe, they divided into several hunting groups. Every hunting route opened up by the ancestors had a hunting group going in that direction. The reason why they had to follow the route was to avoid those unknown and unpredictable factors. What kind of beasts were on each hunting route? How many ferocious beasts were there? What was the geographical environment like? All of these could be learned from the experiences of generations of hunting warriors. If they deviated too much from this path, they wouldn't be able to react in time, which would lead to greater losses. Of course, the hunting route was only a general direction. Based on this, they could do whatever they wanted. For example, Mai's hunting group's route was to climb over the mountain where the first stronghold was, then cross the basin, and then walk past the current mountain to reach the other side. As for some people in the tribe who had their own ideas and wanted to open up a new route, they could only dream about it when the shaman and the chief made a joint decision. What? You want to open up a new hunting route by yourself? Are you better than our ancestors? Absolutely impossible. A new route can't be opened up so easily. Do you think this route is not good? How dare you? How dare you doubt our ancestors? Believe it or not, I'll beat you to death. People in the tribe were always very persistent about the things passed down by their ancestors. Even if there were many decisions that Xiaofan didn't think were appropriate, people in the tribe didn't think they were wrong at all. In addition to being loyal to the totem, people in the tribe also worshipped and trusted their ancestors, which was beyond Xiaofan's imagination. Even if their ancestors climbed out of the ground and told them that there was only one moon in the sky, people in the tribe would nod without hesitation. This was also the result of the shaman's brainwashing education, which was passed down from generation to generation. Every hunting group leader of each generation always felt that only by going through all the routes that their ancestors had taken, could they live up to their ancestors' reputation, and also be worthy of the hunting route that their ancestors had opened up. Looking at the names written on the stone wall at the entrance of the cave, it was clear that those hunting groups all had the same idea. After entering the cave, they lit the fire. The hunting group didn't go further in. According to their previous habits, they would spend the night at the entrance of the cave, and go in the next morning. It would take some time to go through this cave, because it was not a straight path. How did this cave that leads to the other side of the mountain come about? Xiaofan asked Lang Jie when they were resting around the fire. When our ancestors found this place, the cave already existed. It was said that there was a king stoneworm at the foot of the mountain, and all the winding paths in the mountain were made by it. Lang Jie said. Stoneworm? Xiaofan was very surprised. This circular path was at least 10 meters high, and according to Mai and the others, besides the paths that connected the two sides of the mountain, there were many other paths that led to the underground or the top of the mountain. It was really hard to imagine that such a large scale of holes in the cave was made by a stoneworm. How big must it be? It couldn't be compared with the stoneworms that were used as bait. However, this should be the story passed down by the ancestors who first came here to open up the hunting route. As for whether there really was a stoneworm or not, it still needed to be verified. Then, have any of our ancestors seen the stoneworm at the foot of the mountain? Xiaofan asked. It had been many years since the first hunting group came here to open up the hunting route. Even if the hunting group didn't stay here for long, someone must have seen it, right? No. Lang Jie saw that Xiaofan was still doubtful, so he said, but listen, there are sounds coming from the cave, so there must be a king stoneworm. Xiaofan tilted his head and listened carefully. There were indeed some faint whistling sounds, but it wasn't necessarily caused by the stone worms. Since there were many caves in the mountain, if the wind blew in from one cave and out from the other caves, there would still be the same sound. There were still many doubts in his heart, but looking at Lang Jie, Xiaofan wouldn't get an answer even if he asked. Not wanting to argue with these stubborn people, Xiaofan asked, "What's on the other side of the mountain? What's the difference between here and here?" As expected, Lang Ga's attention was quickly diverted. Different? Actually, the biggest difference is that there are many huge birds on the other side of the mountain. Lang Jie stretched out his arms and gestured. Although the length of his arms was limited, Xiaofan knew from his exaggerated expression that they must be really, really huge. In fact, thinking about it carefully, Xiaofan found that from the time he entered the forest until now, he had rarely seen large raptors. Although many of them were already huge in Xiaofan's eyes, according to Lang Ga's description, there were even bigger and fiercer raptors on the other side of the mountain. The feathers on the heads of some warriors during the snow festival ceremony were probably hunted on the other side of the mountain. Chapter 56. After a good night's sleep, the next morning, the hunting group packed up their things and started to walk through the cave. Xiaofan had a good night's sleep, and did not dream of anything horrible. "Everyone, follow us closely, especially Xian and Mao. It's your first time to walk, so you have to be extra careful. If you get lost, you may never come out again," Mai said seriously. He was not trying to scare them, but was telling the truth. Even the first few generations of ancestors who opened up this hunting route had to pay a heavy price before they finally found the correct path. In this huge maze, it was unknown how many people had entered and never came out. "Yes, don't worry. We will be careful," Xiaofan said. Mao also nodded. In the hunting group, he had always obeyed the rules, and he knew that it was right to listen to the older warriors. It was getting darker as they walked deeper into the cave. Every few people in the hunting group held a torch. As they walked away from the entrance of the cave, there was only the light from the torches. It was not bright, but it was enough to see the path under their feet. Just like what Mai had told Xiaofan, in the cave, the deeper they walked, the more they would find that there were many intersecting paths. Sometimes, they would find 2 or 3 entrances after a turn, but the hunting group had been walking on only one of them. Even if there were many paths that connected to the outside world, people who did not know the way would get lost soon after entering the cave. Maybe they would return to the original place after several turns. Probably because there were many paths connected to the outside world, the cave was not suffocating, but there was always some faint wind, and the rhythmic sound of some large animal breathing. For the time being, they did not see any aggressive creatures in the cave, but it was said that there were some insects and spiders living in the cave. The paths in the cave were not only winding, but also sometimes high and sometimes low. Sometimes they would slide down, and sometimes they had to climb steep slopes. They had to be careful not to fall behind. In the hunting group, the ones who were most familiar with the path were basically those experienced warriors. The younger ones, like Lang Jie, might not be able to remember such a complicated path. It was not that no one had ever thought of leaving a mark on the cave wall, but every time they left, those marks would disappear. All kinds of incidents made the hunting group believe that there must be a king stoneworm in the mountain, just as the ancestors had guessed. It was just that no one had ever seen it before. Therefore, later hunting groups stopped leaving marks on the cave wall, and tried not to make too much noise when they passed through the cave. They were afraid of disturbing the giant creature in the mountain. In the tribe, stoneworms did look harmless, but the king stoneworm was different. Otherwise, how could it have the word king in the name? Just like the previous hunting team, Xiaofan and Mao walked in the middle of the team, so that they could better protect them. Xiaofan used his special ability to observe other places in the cave. Sometimes they would see some larger insects, but those insects did not attack the hunting group, and the hunting group would not provoke them. For one thing, they did not know how many such insects were in the cave. It would be troublesome if they attracted a large group of them. Another thing was, they did not want to make too much noise. If they accidentally disturbed the big guy in the mountain, it would be a real disaster. If the cave was a straight line, it would not take long for them to get out of the mountain. But the hunting group spent almost half a day in the mountain before they heard my say, almost at the exit. They turned a corner and walked out. There were 2 entrances in front of them, one of which led to the exit. But at the moment, there were spiders blocking the entrances. They were a kind of eyeless spiders. Probably because they lived in the dark cave for a long time, their eyes gradually deteriorated. Their torsos were relatively small, but their legs were very long, and they could directly cover the entrance like a cover. Mai and 2 other warriors, who were walking in the front, were holding torches and spears to scare the spiders blocking the entrances. The spiders could feel the heat of the flames, and when the torches were swaying, they would flinch. There were only 2 eyeless spiders on the path leading to the outside of the cave. Compared to them, there were more spiders on the other side. What's more, because of the swaying torches, the spiders on both sides of the path started to move. They waved their chelicerae and opened their fangs at the people who were holding the torches, as if they were warning the people in the hunting group. Don't worry about them. Let's go. On the other side, Mai had already chased away the eyeless spiders that were blocking the tunnel entrance. He called for the team members behind him to hurry up and catch up. Based on his experience, eyeless spiders rarely stubbornly fought with humans. Their food was other insects in the cave, so as long as they were careful not to provoke them, they could still successfully avoid them by taking a step back. However, an accident happened at this moment. Xiaofan, who was protected in the middle, suddenly felt a chill on the back of his neck. He became alert and looked around at the eyeless spiders waving their chelicerae. No, it was not them. Xiaofan raised his head and saw a black whip rolling down like lightning. Xiaofan only had time to block it with his saber, but his whole body was wrapped tightly and pulled up. All this happened in a flash. Most of the warriors in the hunting group were busy guarding against the eyeless spiders. They did not expect that there was another one above their heads, but it did not seem to be an eyeless spider. Those who had noticed it were still a step too late and couldn't stop it. Xian was dragged away. Why is there a hole above? It was not there last time. What was that? At this moment, the warriors did not have time to retreat. They blocked the approaching eyeless spiders and stabbed a few of them. However, Xiaofan was dragged away from above, so it was difficult to climb up. Mai asked the others to deal with the approaching eyeless spiders, while he climbed up the cave wall. Not long after, Mai came back with a gloomy face. The creature that dragged Xiaofan away was too fast. When Mai caught up with it, it was already gone, and he could not hear Xiaofan's shouts. Moreover, not long after climbing up, there were forks that led up, down, or even straight up. After several attempts, Mai could only return without success. Inside the mountain, those creatures that had lived in the dark for many years knew much more about the cave than they did. Mai was still worried about the others in the hunting group, so he had to go back first. After all, he was the leader of this hunting group, and he had to be responsible for the other 30 warriors. Mai punched the cave wall angrily, and then went back to deal with the increasing number of eyeless spiders with the others. The situation was getting worse for them. The warriors in the hunting group had to rush out from the forks. They were not far from the cave, and the eyeless spiders would not chase them outside, because they did not like light. It was common for a hunting group to lose someone. This time it was Xiaofan, and there would be others in the future. However, Lang Jie and the others were younger and less rational. They wanted to keep looking for him, but they were pulled away by the others. Some of the older warriors were already used to this kind of parting. Many warriors sighed in their hearts. Why was Xian so unlucky? It was his first hunting trip, and he encountered everything. Not long after, the warriors in the hunting group saw the light, and the eyeless spiders that were chasing them also stopped. On the other side, Xiaofan was not feeling well after being dragged away. The thing that dragged him away was a kind of insect that lived in the cave. It was a little smaller than the eyeless spiders, but its strength and speed were not inferior to the eyeless spiders. The thing that caught Xiaofan was the insect's long antennae. There was a hook-like sawtooth structure at the tip of the antennae. If Xiaofan had not reacted fast enough and blocked the sawtooth with his stone knife, he would have been cut when he was caught. The sawtooth at the tip of the antennae made a clattering sound when it cut the stone knife. Xiaofan struggled hard, but he only loosened a little bit, and still could not get rid of it. When he was about to turn a corner, Xiaofan directly hit the stone wall at the corner, and almost threw up the food he had eaten in the morning. After he endured the pain and loosened his grip a little, Xiaofan pulled out the tooth knife with the broken tip, and fiercely chopped at the antennae. Bang! The antennae that caught Xiaofan was cut off, and the insect that lost one of its antennae also jumped around in pain. Xiaofan, who was thrown off, rolled on the ground and fell into a passage on the side. The passage was downward, and Xiaofan did not have time to stand still, and slid down the slope again. He did not know how long he had slid, and when he finally stood still, Xiaofan felt dizzy. He had hit the wall several times, and was dragged along the way, and now he was in pain all over. Gasping for breath, Xiaofan still wanted to go back the way he came. The longer he stayed here, the more dangerous it would be. Just when he was about to climb up the steep slope, Xiaofan heard a whistling sound from the passage behind him. It sounded like wind, but with a rhythm. The reward list for March has been listed. Please check the book. Thank you for your support in the past month. The book will be published on May 1st. Chapter 57. At first, there was only a faint whistling sound, and it was very vague. It was even easy to confuse it with the sound he had heard in the other tunnels. But soon, the whistling sound became clearer. Xiaofan remembered that Lang Jie had told him that there was a king stoneworm in this mountain. He did not believe it before. After all, so many warriors in the tribe had passed by, but none of them had seen the legendary king stoneworm. Even the stories passed down by their ancestors were just guesses. There was indeed some whistling sound in the tunnel, which was the sound of the air flowing in the wind. But now, Xiaofan was sure that it was not the sound of the wind, and that the whistling sound was coming closer. Xiaofan's body tensed up, and he moved his legs gently to climb up the steep slope. The wall on this side of the cave was more slippery than the path the hunting group had taken, and it was harder to climb. Xiaofan did not dare to use the stone knife, for he was afraid that the sound would alarm the king stoneworm. Mai and the others had told them to be as quiet as possible in the cave, and they had their reasons. The whistling sound was getting closer, and it was much faster than Xiaofan had expected. In the blink of an eye, it was already very close. It was a little damp in the cave, and there was a smell similar to lime in the air, which was getting thicker and thicker. Xiaofan could clearly feel that the humidity in the cave was rising, and there was a layer of tiny water droplets on the wall he was climbing, which made the wall even more slippery and difficult to climb. Xiaofan's feet slipped a few times before he could steady himself. He could not climb anymore. He could clearly feel the layer of slippery liquid between his palms and the wall, and it was the same under his feet. It was not easy to stay in one place, and if he relaxed a little, he might slip down again. It was inexplicable. It was incomprehensible. The wall was fine just now, although it was a little slippery and steep, but with Xiaofan's ability, it was not difficult for him to climb up. But how long had it been? The wall had changed so much. However, there was no time for Xiaofan to think too much. Rhythmic cheers could be heard from below. The place where he fell was relatively flat, but after a few more steps, he could see the tunnel that continued to extend downwards. Xiaofan could only see a small part of the tunnel that he was in. He did not know if there were other tunnels or how many tunnels there were. If it was really the King Stoneworm, what should he do? What would he do if the King Stoneworm came to where he was? Xiaofan clenched his 5 fingers, and his fingertips almost dug into the cave wall. However, that was all he could do. The stone here was very hard, and he might be able to dig a little deeper if he used his totemic power. However, Xiaofan didn't dare to use it carelessly. Some high-level beasts were very sensitive to totemic power, and none of them used their totemic power when they were walking in the cave. Xiaofan maintained his posture of clinging to the wall. He was too nervous, and his whole body was stiff. He didn't know if it was sweat or water droplets that had gathered on his face because of the humidity in the cave. The cave was not hot or stuffy. On the contrary, Xiaofan felt that the cave was getting colder and colder. He didn't know if it was because the cave was cool or if it was just his imagination. The lime-like smell in his nose was getting thicker and thicker. He looked up, and the scene in his field of vision was also changing. In Xiaofan's field of vision, the water droplets were white, which was different from the gray color of the surrounding cave walls. However, the white color soon covered the gray cave walls, and it quickly spread upwards along the cave walls. This meant that the cave walls above were all the same as the one Xiaofan was clinging to. Whoosh, whoosh, the sound was getting closer and closer, and it was coming from below. Accompanying the whooshing sound was the sound of something slithering, as if some creature was squirming. Xiaofan quietly clung to the cave wall, carefully controlling his breathing and heartbeat to reduce his presence. It was as if he had merged with everything in the cave. Even if Lang Jie and the others were standing here, they might not be able to notice Xiaofan clinging to the cave wall. Listening to the sound coming from below, Xiaofan thought that if the thing below really came this way, he would have no choice but to go all out. If his fingers couldn't hold on to the cave wall, then he would use his saber. If a saber wasn't enough, then he would add a spearhead. That way, he would be able to climb up, right? Although he was dragged over by that unknown insect, he still had his equipment. Even if the sound alarmed that thing, there was nothing he could do. Escaping was the most important thing. In addition to the whooshing sound, there was also the sound of a heartbeat. Thump, thump, thump. The sound was not loud, but it felt like his heart was being hammered, again and again, and it shook his chest until the blood in his body was surging. It was like the sound of a drum on a quiet battlefield, and the quiet cave seemed to be shaking with this rhythm. The pressure came with it. Or, it could be called the aura. It was like layers of thick dark clouds were pressing towards him. Xiaofan felt that it was extremely difficult to breathe. Without the help of totem power, his body was still weaker. Just when Xiaofan heard the sound approaching, and was about to use his totem power to climb up, the whooshing sound and the thunder-like thumping sound gradually faded away. It seemed that there were other forks at the end of this path. Fortunately, the King Stoneworm did not come this way. When the sound gradually faded away, Xiaofan's muscles all over his body relaxed. In order to survive that short moment, Xiaofan had used up almost all of his strength. He did not fight, he did not fight, he did not do anything. He just leaned on the cave wall, but he was even more tired than when he fought against the thorn-black wind. Because of this, Xiaofan could not control his hands, and his whole body slid down the cave wall, back to the place where he rolled down. Xiaofan could hear his heart beating like a drum, and it took him a while to calm down. As if he had sensed something, Xiaofan turned around and looked at the cave wall that he had been leaning on. In his special vision, the cave wall was originally covered in a layer of white, but now the white was gradually fading, and it was gradually changing from the distance to the top of the cave. It looked like the white that had spread to the top of the cave was shrinking back. The humidity in the cave gradually returned to its original state, and it was no longer so humid. Even the strong smell of lime was gradually disappearing. Feeling a little itchy on his face, Xiaofan raised his head and touched his face. A layer of powdery rock came off, and his palms were also covered in a layer of hard rock. He moved his palms and felt a layer of rock falling off. Thinking of something, Xiaofan climbed to the top of the cave. Without that layer of sticky liquid, climbing became much easier. After checking the cave wall carefully, Xiaofan found that the fingerprints he had left on the wall when he was climbing up were all gone, as if he had never climbed there. No wonder the people in the hunting group would leave marks in the cave, and the next time they walked in, those marks would disappear. It seemed to be similar to what he had just encountered. The cave returned to its original state, as if no living creature had ever been here. Xiaofan did not go down, but climbed up along the cave wall. He wanted to see if he could return to the path that the hunting group had taken. Finally, he climbed up along the cave wall. Looking around, Xiaofan was dumbfounded. He should have cut off the antennae of the insect that dragged him here. But now, there were no antennae, no other insects, and no eyeless spiders. There were no other sounds, and there were no signs of a struggle or a drag in the surroundings. Everything in the cave seemed to have been restored. In front of Xiaofan, there were 3 cave entrances, which looked exactly the same. There was no trace of other living creatures, so he could not tell them apart. Which cave had he been dragged here from? Thinking carefully, Xiaofan found that he could not remember at all, nor did he know which cave he should enter from. Taking a deep breath, Xiaofan clenched his fists, and cursed in his mind, "Fuck. Sorry, there is only one more update for tonight. Good night, everyone. Thank you for your April Fool's Day tips, and thank the first chief of this book for looking at money and earning more." Chapter 58. Outside the cave, Lang Jie and the others were waiting. According to the rules of the hunting group, if anyone had an accident inside, the hunting group would wait for a day at the entrance of the cave. After a day, they would continue the hunt. There would be casualties every year, but the hunt would still go on. It didn't matter who was missing. Xian should be fine, right? Lang Jie was walking back and forth at the entrance of the cave, looking very anxious. He wanted to go in and look for Xiaofan, but the situation inside stopped him. He didn't even remember the passages that connected the 2 sides of the mountain, so he knew far less about the caves than Mai and the other old warriors. Even the old warriors couldn't do anything about it, let alone him. Yes, Xian is so lucky. He could even kill a thorn black wind. Maybe he can come out alive. Ong also said. The others also tried to comfort him, but some of the older warriors had different opinions. They were different from the young warriors like Lang Ga. They had experienced a lot. Even if they hadn't experienced it themselves, they had heard about it. The situation in this mountain was much more troublesome than that of the thorn black wind. Killing the thorn black wind could be said to be a stroke of luck. In addition, the thorn black wind's fighting ability had decreased a lot in this cold environment, so it was killed by Xiaofan. But it was different here. When the ancestors opened up this hunting route, many people had died to find such a passage. But Xian was just a kid who had just awakened his totemic power. In terms of strength, who could he compare with in the hunting group? Although they comforted Lang Jie and the others by saying that Xian was lucky, in fact, the old warriors in the hunting group were thinking, how could this kid be so unlucky? He had just escaped from the thorn black wind, and met with an accident in the cave. They couldn't even find him. Some would join, and some would leave. Luck and misfortune, that's what it was. Even the ancestors couldn't escape from their fate, so what could Xian do? Since this route was opened up, no one who went missing in the cave ever came out. It was such a pity that such a good seedling was lost. They were thinking about going back to watch him walk on the path of glory, but he was lost here. Sai, Mai was naturally not in a good mood after losing a member of his team. Moreover, this person was someone he had always thought highly of. Knowing that no one ever came out of the hole after it was lost, Mai sat there in silence. He regretted that he should have been more cautious at that time. If he had discovered that there was a hole above, if he had not paid too much attention to the eyeless spider, perhaps this would not have happened. At the same time, Xiaofan, who was standing at the fork, was also in a dilemma. Out of the 3 paths, only one of them was the one he had been dragged through. The other 2 paths might lead to other places in the mountain, and if he took one wrong step, he probably wouldn't be able to get out. He took a deep breath and tried his best to calm down. Thinking back, Xiaofan remembered that on the night of their awakening, the shaman had taught them a lesson and said, "The power of the fire seed can show you the most correct direction, just like how our ancestors used fire to illuminate the night in the most ancient times." Intuition, the intuition brought by the power of kindling, Xiaofan activated the totemic power in his body. In his mind, the flames wrapped around the horns of the totemic power suddenly increased. He stared at the 3 paths in front of him. After a while, Xiaofan lifted his feet and walked towards the middle path. The cave was very quiet now, and the eyeless spider and other insects were nowhere to be seen. Xiaofan kept walking along this path, but soon, damn it. Where was his intuition? Where was the power of the fire seed that could show him the right direction? It was all a lie. The shaman was a fraud. If not for the fact that he was afraid of disturbing the king's stoneworm, Xiaofan would have cursed out loud. He was now sure that he was not walking on the path that he had been dragged through before. Even if he could not remember which path he had taken at the fork, he could remember how many times he had been hit. When he was being dragged by the insect, he would hit the wall every time he turned a corner, but now, Xiaofan had been hit more times than before. And, until now, he did not have any sense of familiarity. So, was his intuition on strike? Leaning against the wall, Xiaofan scratched his head. Why was he so unlucky? He did not do anything bad in the tribe, and even helped those weak children in the cave. Why was he always so unlucky? Could it be? Xiaofan remembered that during the snow festival ceremony, others were praying, but he was thinking about the changes in his body. During the ceremony before the hunt, he did not sing the hunting song with the other warriors, and even fooled them with a straight face. Was this karma? So the totemic power and fire seed that the shaman had been talking about protecting the tribesmen did not protect him? Bullshit. If they could really protect him, the ancestors that Lang Jie mentioned would not have all died here. Thinking about it, Xiaofan's face gradually turned cold. If there was light, one could see the coldness in his eyes. Xiaofan, who was leaning against the wall, suddenly jumped up. Just as he leapt up, the shadow of a whip lashed at the wall of the cave where he was leaning on. Squeak, the sawtooth at the front of the tentacle cut the wall, making a sharp sound. It was that insect, the one that dragged him here. Being hit once was a lesson, but if he was hit twice, he would be stupid. In Xiaofan's vision, the insect was made up of some thin bones, which looked like bones that were not very sturdy. But in fact, those thin bones could not only support the insect, but also make it move faster, and almost make no sound when running in the cave. In addition to those thin bones, there was a layer of hard shell on the insect's back for protection. The most dangerous part was its pair of tentacles. No, it was not just a pair anymore. When it tried to catch Xiaofan, Xiaofan cut off one of its tentacles. However, compared to the armor-like hard thorns of the thorn black wind, this insect was much weaker. Its advantage was only that it could sneak attack and take advantage of others, but it was not impossible to defeat it. In the territory of the king stoneworm, the king stoneworm allowed some small fry to rest and recuperate, but it would not allow any species that were slightly threatening to stay here. Obviously, Xiaofan was not the only one who hated that insect. The insect also hated Xiaofan for cutting off one of its tentacles. Not being able to hit Xiaoxian, the insect was very angry. It stood up halfway, and used its 2 pairs of legs to stabilize its body. The front 2 sickle-like forelimbs carried cold blades, and mercilessly cut at Xiaoxian. After jumping up, Xiaoxian stomped on the top of the cave, and the top of the cave cracked instantly. Using the top of the cave, Xiaoxian suddenly turned around in the air. Instead of retreating, he rushed toward the insect with the knife in his hand. Here, the insect had the advantage. Xiaoxian might not be able to outrun it even if he wanted to run. Both of them held grudges, so they had to take revenge as soon as possible. Also, according to the insect's style, if they wanted to get rid of it, they had to do it as soon as possible. The distance between Xiaoxian and the insect was about 10 meters, which was about the same length as the insect's tentacles. However, as Xiaoxian rushed forward, the distance between them was instantly shortened. The insect was still waving its 2 forelimbs, which almost blocked the entire cave. The airflow was like a knife, which made Xiaoxian's face hurt. Teeth knife blocked one of its forelimbs. The explosive force of the collision numbed Xiaoxian's arm, but he did not stop. He quickly turned around, bypassed the knife light, and rushed to the back of the insect. Xiaoxian stepped on the cave wall with his right foot. Using the force, he aimed at the intersection of the insect's back and head, and slashed at its extended neck like lightning. There was no back armor to protect it, and there was no shield-like hard shell on its head. Realizing that Xiaoxian was getting behind it, the insect realized that something was wrong. However, it could not defend itself. Its long tentacles had not been retracted, and its 2 forelimbs could not hook behind it. It hurriedly retracted its tentacles, trying to pull out Xiaoxian, who was getting behind it. However, it was still a bit too slow. Even without the teeth knife was still hard. It was a knife made by old Ku himself. Even if there were some nicks on the blade, it was enough to cut the insect's neck. Puff! The teeth knife cut through the softest part of the insect's neck from top to bottom. The length of the teeth knife was limited, so it could only cut off half of the insect's neck. However, this half was enough to make the insect lose its fighting ability. Even the retracted long tentacles were soft and powerless. Xiaoxian pulled back the knife, and took the opportunity to cut off the insect's head again. This time, he almost cut off the insect's entire head. The waving forelimbs were no longer powerful, and the retracted tentacles fell to the ground. The half-standing insect finally fell down. Gasping, Xiaoxian moved his still numb arm. He walked over and cut off the insect's remaining long tentacle, and held it in his hand. After resting for a while, Xiaoxian planned to leave. There was an insect's corpse here, and he did not know if it would attract other insects in the cave. He had to leave immediately. Standing sideways in the middle of the cave, Xiaoxian decided to go on the left, and go back to the right. Should he go on, or go back to the fork again? Perhaps, when they went back, they would be able to go back to the same path that the hunting group had taken. However, he could also choose the wrong path again, and encounter other creatures that he could not defeat. Time was running out, so Xiaoxian had to make a decision immediately. After closing his eyes and thinking for a while, Xiaoxian turned to the left. This time, he did not rely on the intuition brought by the fire seed. He almost blocked the 2 horns with flames in his mind. At the same time, the egg-shaped light covering the totem was getting brighter and brighter. But the choice was still this one. Opening his eyes, Xiaoxian held the tentacle and continued to move forward. Plus 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 equals 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 plus 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 equals 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 equals. Sorry for being late. I took my computer to someone to fix it, and it was not fixed until 10 o'clock. It was already very late when I came back. Chapter 59. He wasn't sure if it was because of the king's stone worm, but he had only seen the worm that dragged him here. He hadn't seen any other creatures. Maybe it was because the king's stone worm had woken up and walked around, so the eyeless spiders and other insects all hid in their nests. As for the insect that Xiaofan had just killed, it probably came here for revenge. If that was the case, should he go back to the fork and change his route? Forget it. Xiaofan shook his head, and decided to follow his intuition. There was something strange about this mountain. Xiaofan rolled up the feeler that he had cut off from the insect's head on his arm. Except for the sawtooth hook at the tip, the rest of the feeler was very soft. Xiaofan did not feel any pain when he wrapped it around his arm. Xiaofan did not know which part of the mountain he was in. After staying in the mountain for so long, he found that his strong sense of direction was not useful at all. It was a very strange phenomenon. Even when he played maze games in his previous life, he could remember all the places in the maze. When many people felt a headache and lost their sense of direction, he could still find the right direction quickly. Even if Xiaofan was asked to return from the hunting route, he could still follow the route accurately. But now, Xiaofan was confused. There were many caves in the mountain. Other than the king's stoneworm, there were many other creatures. The eyeless spiders and the insect that Xiaofan had killed were only two of them. Theoretically, there should be traces of all kinds of creatures living in the caves. Unfortunately, there were no traces at all. There were no scratches, no other remains, no spider silks or insect shells. It was as if nothing had ever existed. It was like every time a hunting group left a mark in a cave in the mountain, those marks would all disappear when they left. If the power of totems could really tell those who were lost to choose the right direction and path, how could those ancestors get lost? Xiaofan continued to walk forward based on his intuition. Whenever he encountered a fork in the road, he would carefully sense it and use his special ability to choose which path to take. Xiaofan only hoped that his intuition would not go on strike or lie to him. Otherwise, he would be dead. Just like what Lang Jie and the others said about the ancestors who opened up hunting routes, once lost, they could not go back. Compared to the intuition brought by the fire seed, Xiaofan's senses were stronger when he used that special ability. Xiaofan felt that he was walking down. He had probably left the mountainside and was at the bottom of the mountain. However, Xiaofan persevered. As he walked further down, he encountered some fist-sized insects. In Xiaofan's vision, they were gray and white, and he could only see their vague outlines. When some insects came to Xiaofan would drive them away with the tentacle whip in his hand. Those insects seemed to be afraid of the tentacle whip. When Xiaofan swung the tentacle whip at them, they would avoid it as if they were frightened. Xiaofan speculated that those insects were probably the food of the big insect with long tentacles. Look at them, they were so frightened. In addition to the long tentacle whip, Teeth Knife also carried the smell of the insect. The walls of the cave were densely packed with fist-sized bugs. Xiaofan could even clearly hear the small but concentrated crackling sounds they made as they walked on the walls. However, wherever Xiaofan went, those insects would avoid him. If he did not get rid of the tentacle bug, would it be very troublesome now? Even if these insects were not big, it would be difficult to deal with them in large numbers. Originally, he only wanted to kill the tentacle bug for revenge, but he did not expect to get such a reward. The strange feeling was getting stronger and stronger. If before, it was just a gentle breeze that moved the wind vane, now it was a fierce gust of wind, and the direction was quite clear. This should not be the way out of the mountain, but whether it was the power of the totem or the special ability, it was telling him to go in that direction. What was it? Treasure? Although the direction was clear, Xiaofan did not speed up. He still maintained his pace and was alert of his surroundings. Fortunately, other than those insects, there were no other creatures here. He was getting closer and closer. Xiaofan held the knife in his hand, and was a little nervous. After walking in the cave for so long, Xiao Xian could more or less feel the slight wind, but now, the more he walked forward, the more he felt that there was no road ahead. As he continued to walk forward, the small insects around the cave walls gradually disappeared. The surroundings were very quiet, and when the movements of the small insects were completely gone, there was only dead silence. Other than the lack of other sounds, he could not even feel the flow of air. In front, there seemed to be light. Xiao Xian stopped in his tracks. Light? If he used his normal vision, it would still be dark. Only with the vision of the special ability, he could see the light in the darkness. As he continued to walk towards the light, Xiao Xian suddenly felt an inexplicable feeling in his heart. He could not describe the feeling, it was like some kind of ancient aura, with a sense of desolation and endless sorrow. The light grew bigger and bigger, like a light shield, shrouding that small area. When Xiao Xian finally got closer and saw the scene inside the light shield, his eyelids suddenly twitched. Inside the light shield, there were 4 skeletons, at least in Xiao Xian's vision. In the middle of the light shield, there was a person kneeling, and the other 3 people were surrounding him. The 4 skeletons were all kneeling in the same posture, using the highest ritual in the tribe to worship the totem, kneeling on both knees, crossing their hands in front of their foreheads, and kowtowing in the same direction. Beside them, spears and stone knives were inserted into the ground. In Xiao Xian's vision, these tools and weapons were all very dark in color, especially the spear beside the person in the middle, which was almost black. It could be seen that these stones were of the highest quality, or even the highest quality. At the same time, it also showed that these people were very capable warriors when they were alive, especially the person in the middle. He must have had a high status in the tribe. As for the direction in which the 4 people were kneeling, although his sense of direction was confused, Xiao Xian had a feeling that they were kneeling in the direction of the tribe. After Xiao Xian's vision swept over the 4 skeletons and the stone tools beside them, it stopped at the skeleton kneeling in the middle. The skeleton wore a bone ornament in front of its chest, which was made of some unknown creature's bone. In Xiao Xian's vision, the bone ornament was brighter than the 4 skeletons here. Since he got this special ability, Xiao Xian had studied it and learned that the bones of different levels of totem warriors were different in color. The bones of junior totem warriors were dark white, the bones of intermediate totem warriors were white, and the bones of more advanced totem warriors, such as Chief Aos, were bright white. At this time, the bones of these 4 skeletons were all bright white. Although the degree of brightness was different, it was true, especially the one in the middle. But even so, they were not as bright as the bone ornament. However, this was still not the most important thing. The most important thing that attracted Xiao Xian's attention was a ball on the bone ornament. It was not a bone, but like a light bulb, it illuminated the surroundings, which was the light shield Xiao Xian saw. Switching his vision and retracting his special ability, he looked at it with his normal eyes, but it was still dark, and he could not see any light. But when he switched his vision to the special ability, he could see that the ball was still bright, and it shrouded the surroundings in its light. After observing for a while, Xiao Xian also found that the skeleton in the middle was still intact, but the other 3 skeletons were different. Some of their bones that were in contact with the ground had sunk into the stone surface of the cave, and the closer they were to the edge of the light shield, the deeper they sank. Within the range of the light shield, he could see some scattered stone tools. The stone materials were all very good, but some of them had sunk into the ground, and only a part of them was exposed. Outside the range of the light shield, Xiao Xian did not see any stone tools, skeletons, or other things. This mountain could eat people. Not only did they eat humans, but they would also eat other things. For example, the insect that Xiao Xian had just killed. If there were no other creatures to eat it, the remains of the insect might also become like this and gradually be swallowed by the mountain. This mountain had already eaten a lot. There were people who had passed away, dead insects, and things that had been placed there. Other than those holes, nothing else was left. But now, The people and stone tools in the light shield had been preserved to this day because of the ball of light, even though they had been there for hundreds of years. Chapter 60. The one in the middle was undoubtedly an ancestor of the tribe, and was most likely one of the first people to open up the hunting route. He was too strong, perhaps even stronger than Chief Ao, but Lang Jie and the others had never mentioned it before. The other three might have been from the early group, or they might have gotten lost when they crossed this mountain path. Xiao Xian was not sure. No matter what, Xiao Xian looked at the four skeletons and felt a little conflicted. So, the direction the totem pointed to, the so-called intuition, was here? Weren't the ancestors tricking their tribe? The one in the middle should have been the first to arrive here and died here. The other three might have been with him, or they might have found their way here later. Could it be that the people who got lost were like him, following the intuition given by the totem, and then kneeling here to wait for death? No, it shouldn't be like this. Maybe these people knew they couldn't get out, or maybe they had tried many times, but in the end, they still returned to this place and stayed in the protective circle. Even after hundreds of years, their corpses were still not swallowed by the mountain. Even the oldest group of powerful warriors couldn't escape this place, let alone him, a beginner. Xiao Xian's heart sank. Taking a step forward, Xiao Xian entered the range of the light shield, and suddenly felt a surge of warmth, which eased his uneasiness a little. But that was all. Xiao Xian reached out to the person closest to him. It was dry, not a skeleton, as if it had been air-dried. Even if it had been dead for a long time, he could still feel the power contained in this body. There was no unpleasant smell, perhaps it had been assimilated by the smell of the stones in the cave. He touched the other two people kneeling in the periphery. Like the first person, they were like dried corpses. But when he touched the person in the middle, Xiao Xian found that this person was only slightly shriveled, and his body was much better preserved than the other three kneeling in the periphery. So, it was the effect of the light ball. The light shield emitted by the light ball not only prevented the objects inside from being swallowed by the mountain, but also protected the remains. Even the other creatures living in the cave did not come close to eat the corpses. This was the treasure of the tribe. Those who could possess such a thing would naturally have a higher status. However, now was not the time to think about this. What should he do? Was he going to become the fifth corpse kneeling here? Xiao Xian sat on the ground, feeling a little irritated. Totem, do the people in the tribe know about this? While he was cursing in his heart, Xiao Xian suddenly felt the totem flame in his mind churn. Xiao Xian was startled. He quickly calmed his thoughts and began to circulate the totemic power in his body. This time, it seemed to be another kind of intuition, an intuition that he could walk out of here. As this thought flashed through his mind, Xiao Xian jumped up in excitement. As he paced around, he activated another type of energy in his body. He used it to activate his intuition. To be able to walk out, yes. Perhaps, he could trust the totem one more time? Even if he didn't trust it, he could only trust it. Xiao Xian lifted his foot and walked out. However, after taking a step, the totem flame in Xiao Xian's mind churned. Taking another step, the flame churned again. It was different from when he used the totemic power to hunt. At this moment, the flame churned more like it was telling Xiao Xian that it was angry. Stopping, Xiao Xian looked back at the four skeletons kneeling in the light dome. Did they really not complain when they died? After all, they were trapped here and died in the end. For the people in the tribe, every time they had a problem, they would ask the spirits of their ancestors, the totemic power, and the fire seed for inspiration and guidance. However, the ancestors, the totemic power, and the fire seed could not help them walk out of the dark world in the cave. But looking at these four skeletons carefully, they were kneeling so sincerely, without the slightest bit of resentment. They were kneeling in the direction of the tribe in an extremely standard ritual, taking a step back, the totem flame no longer churned. It was very peaceful. Taking a step away, it began to churn again. Taking a step back, it was peaceful again. There were some things that Xiaofan could not understand. After all, he was different from the aborigines here. But the more he knew that this world was full of all kinds of mysterious powers, and he had to believe in them. Xiaofan looked at the kneeling skeletons in the light dome. Were they actually waiting for someone to bring them back? Unfortunately, after hundreds of years, they were still kneeling here. He let out a long sigh. Xiaofan thought for a moment, then knelt on one knee, crossed his palms in front of his forehead, and bowed to the 4 skeletons. It was the ritual of the tribe to worship the ancestors. Walking over, Xiaofan took out his stone knife and dug out the parts of the skeletons that had been swallowed by the stone surface. At first, he just wanted to try, but he didn't expect that he could really dig it out. Moreover, looking at the skeletons, they were well preserved. Xiaofan dug out the skeletons and the stone tools that had been swallowed up one by one. Xiaofan threw the stone tools into the animal skin bag, and tied the large stone tools together. He also had a leather rope on his body. He tied them up and would take them with him later. These stones were excellent, so he couldn't just leave them here. As for the 4 skeletons, no, to be exact, the 4 dried corpses, Xiaofan tied them together with his long antenna. "Sorry for the offense," Xiaofan said in a low voice. After tying them up, he carried them on his back. They were really heavy. He didn't expect that the ancestors of the tribe had already become dried corpses. They weren't much lighter, even heavier than stones. Carrying the 4 dried corpses and carrying the stone tools, Xiaofan felt like he was carrying a moving light dome. Since this light dome could keep the creatures in the cave away, it could also help Xiaofan block the insects. When they passed by the small insects, they hurriedly scattered as if they had encountered something annoying. Xiaofan didn't even need to use his antenna whip. Xiaofan was still walking based on his intuition. This time, his intuition pointed in a different direction. Not only that, Xiaofan didn't feel like he was walking towards the mountainside. He felt like he was walking on a different path. He didn't encounter any creatures blocking his way. The few eyeless spiders he encountered along the way also retreated when Xiaofan approached. "Tsk, why didn't the ancestors get out with such treasures?" So, they were still lost, right? They couldn't beat the king's stoneworm, so they couldn't directly break the mountain open. In the end, they were trapped in the mountain. Xiaofan rested twice along the way. He ate some dried meat to replenish his energy, and then continued walking. He didn't know how long he had been walking. It could have been a few hours, or dozens of hours. Xiaofan was confused. He didn't have a clue in this place. The only thing he could do was follow his intuition. Finally, Xiaofan smelled the smell of the forest. After staying in this place for so long, the fresh air made Xiaofan ecstatic. There was wind. The wind was blowing from the front. Xiaofan quickened his pace and changed his vision. Then he saw the bright spot in front of him. It was the light coming from the outside. They were out of the mountain. They were really out of the mountain. But if the totem power could really guide the way, why were the ancestors still trapped in the mountain and could only kneel in the direction of the tribe before they died? Not to mention the ancestors, even the hunters in the tribe couldn't walk in the mountain before they were absolutely familiar with the route. Xiaofan couldn't find an answer. The only thing he could think of was that the difference between him and the others was probably his extra special ability. Chapter 61. The hunting group waited at the entrance of the cave until the next afternoon. They were supposed to leave at noon, but Mai and Lang Jie proposed to wait a little longer, so they continued to wait at the entrance. In fact, by this time, Lang Jie and the others had already given up hope, but they were still unwilling to give up. Let's go. If we don't leave now, we'll be late. A warrior at the same age as Mai looked at the sky and said. They did not bring much food, for they had stored all the food they got from the first location. They only brought a small amount of food when they were on their way to the second location. By now, some of the warriors' beastskin bags were already empty. According to the rules of the hunting group, no one would leave when they were waiting for their companions. Even if the food was gone, they could not leave to hunt. This was another kind of mourning ceremony, to remember their companions. Even if they did not see their companions alive or dead, rationally speaking, everyone knew that the lost ones would never come back. Once they left the cave, it meant that they had given up waiting. The morning was over, and the hunting began. The nature of the ceremony was different. Unless they returned from hunting, they would not return to the cave. For some people in the hunting group, it was enough for them to wait until now. Xiao Xian was not a big shot, nor did he have any status in the tribe. They did not need to spend a few days mourning for him. They had to start hunting as soon as possible. Mai looked at the setting sun, and asked everyone to get ready to go. Before they left, everyone lowered their heads slightly, and touched the middle of their eyebrows with one hand. Every time a member of the hunting group left, the other members would hold a simple mourning ceremony like this. Let's go. After the mourning, Mai led the others out of the cave, and prepared to go to another cave on the mountainside. That was their second location. Xiao Xian carried the ancestor on his back and the stone tool in his hand, and walked step by step towards the entrance of the cave. After being in the dark for so long, Xiao Xian did not feel uncomfortable when he saw the light again. He had already heard the chirping of birds and insects outside the cave, and his mood rose sharply. The entrance of the cave was relatively narrow, much narrower than the cave entrance of the mountainside. Perhaps a long time ago, this cave entrance was as big as the other caves, but now, more than half of the cave entrance was blocked by some big rocks that fell from the mountain. Moreover, the cave entrance was also blocked by vines due to the passage of time. The surface of this mountain was the same as other mountains. There was nothing special about it. There were plants and streams. Only the depths of the mountain were different from other mountains. Therefore, the surface of the mountain was the same as the other mountains. There were all kinds of flowers, plants, and insects. The names of all the hunting group leaders carved on the wall of the entrance of the cave were still there and would not disappear. At the entrance of the cave, Xiao Xian listened carefully and observed the outside through the gaps between the vines. He didn't find any dangerous creatures, so he carefully parted the vines and walked out. When he walked, he had to be careful not to let the person on his back hit the rocks. The person was already in such a state. He didn't know if the person would crack if they hit the rocks. Sensing Yang Guang's weak aura, Xiao Xian felt as if he had been reborn. If it weren't for the fact that the environment didn't allow him to do so, he would have roared to vent his anger. He was used to seeing skeletons, so he didn't feel scared. But now, when he turned around and saw the 4 dried corpses, Xiao Xian forced himself to calm down, and tried to hypnotize himself. It's okay. These are the ancestors of the tribe. Even if they are shriveled, withered, and gray, they are still extraordinary. He didn't leave the 4 people on his back immediately. The treasure was still there. Xiao Xian planned to ask for the ancestors' protection before he met up with the hunting group. Xiao Xian didn't know where he was, but when he looked up at the mountain and saw the figures flying in the sky, he felt that he should still be on the same mountain. Moreover, he had already arrived at the other side of the mountain, and was still at the foot of the mountain. He couldn't just wander around like this. He didn't know this place well, and he couldn't fight against those ferocious beasts. He also had to be careful not to be caught by those big birds in the sky. He could only try to contact the hunting group first. Xiao Xian looked down, and found that there was a layer of gray stone powder on his animal skin clothes and pants, as well as on his hands. He rubbed his hands together to get rid of the stone powder. He was going to pick up some leaves from the vines nearby to wipe his hands, but he gave up after thinking about it. Xiaoxian didn't know if the vines were poisonous to people. After wiping his hands, Xiaoxian bent his fingers and put them into his mouth, and blew a whistle with a specific rhythm. It was impossible to shout directly here, because it would attract some creatures. Therefore, Xiaoxian used the old method used by the hunting group. While blowing, Xiaoxian thought about making a deer whistle for hunting in the future. The hunting group, who were walking to the second location, paused, especially Qiaomai, his wife, and the several intermediate totem warriors. Their hearing was better than that of the junior totem warriors, so they could clearly hear the sound that the junior totem warriors could only hear vaguely. Mike. That's. Qiaomai pulled Mike excitedly. Mai signaled her to calm down, and listened carefully. The sound was a little far away, but she could still recognize that it was the secret signal of the hunting team. And it seemed that Xiaoxian was the only one in the team who could blow this kind of whistle. However, they had just left the cave, and the direction of the whistle was not at the cave entrance, but at the foot of the mountain. You guys wait here, Mai said as he ran down the mountain. With a few jumps, his figure disappeared into the bushes. Is it really Xian? Lang Jie said in surprise. Although he couldn't hear it clearly, he had heard the same sound before he found the two kids during the thorn black wind incident. Impossible. Even our ancestors couldn't come out. How could Xian do it? A warrior said. It wasn't that he didn't want Xiaoxian to come back, but he didn't believe in Xiaoxian's ability, because he worshipped his ancestors. But that sound was the same as the one we heard when we found him last time. Ang said. Thinking that Xiaoxian was still alive, Lang Jie couldn't help but ask. Not only Lang Jie, but also the others, who were eager to know the answer. Let's go and have a look. Yeah, let's go and have a look. As long as we don't go out of the mountain, we won't encounter any big ferocious beasts. We can go to the cave later. I want to go too. Generally speaking, people in the hunting group always followed the rules and listened to the leader's words. If the leader asked them to wait, they would do it. But the situation was different now. Since the hunting route was established, almost no one had been able to come out of it after going missing. Even the ancestors couldn't do it. After a discussion, several intermediate totem warriors decided to go and have a look as well. So, after Mike ran there, the others in the hunting group followed him. Mai followed the voice and saw a grayish-white person standing there. At first, Mike didn't pay attention to what Xiaoxian was carrying on his back, nor did he look carefully at the stone tools Xiaoxian put at his feet. Now, Mike was shocked. Even though Xiaoxian was covered with a layer of gray stone powder, he was still a kid. He knew who he was at first glance. Xian, you're really okay. The others in the hunting group who followed him also arrived, and they recognized Xiaoxian. Lang Jie quickly approached Xiaoxian, ready to give him a warrior's hug to celebrate Xiaoxian's narrow escape. But when he saw what Xiaoxian was carrying on his back, he stammered, Xian. What? What's that on your back? All eyes were fixed on Xiaoxian's back. This, Xiaoxian turned around so that the others could have a better look at the person on his back. He pointed and said, it's the ancestor. But Xiaoxian still underestimated the weight of the word ancestor in the hearts of the people in the tribe. As soon as the word ancestor was mentioned, Xiaoxian found that the others in the hunting group seemed to be frozen. They stood there blankly, but their eyes turned red, and their breaths were rapid and heavy. Their facial muscles were twitching, and they looked a little twisted. Their bodies even began to tremble. The people who were normal a moment ago were now all acting strange. Wait, don't get too excited. Let's talk slowly. Chapter 62. Don't get too excited. How could that be possible? Take it slow. What should he say? He couldn't say it. He was an ancestor, he was an ancestor. No one doubted Xiaofan's words. They all knew that only people from the Yanjiao tribe lived here. Moreover, those who were lost in the cave were either elders or even older ancestors. The possibility of it being an ancestor was higher. When they thought that Xiaofan was carrying an ancestor on his back, they felt a strong emotion in their hearts. They believed in totems and worshipped their ancestors. For them, totems were needless to say, and the word ancestor also carried the holy light. The hunting team, who had been trembling all over, finally moved. At first, they only took small steps to get closer to Xiaofan. They were usually able to jump easily during hunting, but now, even a small step seemed to take all their strength. Gradually, their steps became faster and faster, but they were still taking small steps, as if they would disturb their ancestors if they took too big a step. They were all very careful. Looking at more than 30 hunting warriors coming towards him, Xiaofan suddenly wanted to turn around and run away. He couldn't help it. The expressions on these people's faces were too crazy, which made Xiaofan's heart beat like a drum. When they were only 3 steps away from Xiaofan, Mai, who was walking in the front, took the lead and knelt down on one knee with the rest of the hunting team. They made a heavy bow to worship their ancestors. Although they only knelt down on one knee, which was not as good as kneeling down to worship totems, Xiaofan felt pain when he heard the sound of their knees hitting the ground. What's more, except for Mao, these people were much older than him, and their seniority in the tribe was much higher than his. But they all knelt down in front of him. Xiaofan, what the hell? Would this shorten my lifespan? Xiaofan only felt that a group of Caesar were howling in his heart. Thinking of this, Xiaofan couldn't help but move a little to the side. Don't move. Mai and the others shouted at the same time, stopping Xiaofan in his tracks. Xiaofan, who had just taken a step forward, froze. Seeing everyone like this, Xiaofan really didn't know what to do. He stood there stiffly for a while, only feeling that the 4 ancestors on his back were as heavy as 10,000 pounds, making him sweat profusely. After everyone in the hunting group knelt down, Xiaofan watched them carefully and respectfully untie the 4 ancestors from Xiaofan's back. Seeing that Xiaofan had tied up the 4 ancestors, he felt that this was too disrespectful to the ancestors. When he looked again, he saw that they were tied up with the antennae of the abominable insects in the cave. Xiaofan, who was resting next to them, was glanced at over and over again by the condemning eyes of the crowd. However, he was thick-skinned and pretended that he didn't know anything. He wasn't stupid enough to explain to these fanatical people, especially when they were in an extreme mood. It was impossible to reason with them. However, even if they couldn't be reasoned with, Xiaofan didn't want to continue being glanced at like this. So, he diverted the crowd's attention and told them about what had happened in the cave. Previously, the crowd was indeed curious about how Xiaofan got out of the cave, but all their attention was on the ancestors, so they didn't have time to care about anything else. Now that they heard Xiaofan's story, they all pricked up their ears. Of course, Xiaofan wouldn't reveal his trump card. He simply said that after he killed the insect, he encountered the king's stoneworm. However, he didn't see it with his own eyes, but only felt the changes in the surroundings. Then, he thought about the shaman's guidance and the totem's guidance, and found the ancestors. Although he didn't mention that he had seen the light shield, he wanted to let the others know that it would be best to put the 3 mummies, or rather, the 3 ancestors together with the man with the mysterious bone ornament. That was why he told them about his speculation. I think that the bone ornament carried by the ancestor has a special power that can protect the ancestors. Xiaofan told them about his speculation. The crowd thought about it and agreed. They also felt comfortable when they were close to the ancestor. He was indeed an ancestor. Even though the mysterious bone ornament was indeed a treasure, no one in the hunting group had the intention to take it for themselves. That was the advantage of being fanatical. They wouldn't forget their ancestors and the rules of the tribe. Thus, everyone carefully invited the 4 ancestors who had just been separated back together. When they heard Xiaofan's description of how he found the 4 ancestors, the crowd burst into tears. They felt as if they were watching that bleak scene from the side. They felt that the ancestors were still thinking about the tribe even before they died. In order to open up a hunting route, they were trapped in the cave for hundreds of years and couldn't return. Everyone was really worried about the ancestors. They were so sad that their snot and tears were running down their cheeks. Especially the young ones like Lang Jie, they wanted to cry out loud. Why didn't he feel that the people in the tribe were so emotional before? Seeing this scene, Xiaofan tried his best to keep the expression on his face, so that his face wouldn't twitch. In the past, he only knew that people in the tribe were obsessed with hero worship and chief worship. But now, he knew that compared with the ancestors, the former 2 were nothing. These 4 ancestors had been dead for God knows how many years, but they had always maintained the posture of kneeling. Therefore, when the hunting group carried the ancestors, they were careful not to face the ancestors, and tried to make the ancestors kneel in the direction of the tribe. There were only 4 dried corpses and 30 warriors. Normally, they would fight ferociously against ferocious beasts and could knock over a bear with a single punch. But now, they were so busy that they were sweating profusely. Even the slightest movement had to be considered over and over again. They were extremely cautious. It was really taxing on their mind and body. Yet, they still looked like they were enjoying it. As Xiaofan expected, although the 4 ancestors had dried up and hardened, and their original faces could not be seen clearly, to be honest, Xiaofan found them to be quite horrifying. He even had to mentally prepare himself several times to carry them out. However, it was exactly this kind of appearance that was shining with holy light in the hearts of everyone in the hunting group. When they stood up, they could not wait to kneel down and worship them again. Finally, before the evening, the hunting group carried the ancestors to the cave in the second location. Originally, it would only take them a short while to walk from the foot of the mountain to the second location, but to invite the 4 ancestors to the second location, it took them nearly 2 hours to walk. After they carried the ancestors back to the cave and arranged them properly, the hunting group knelt down again. Even in their dreams, they called out ancestors. Since such a thing had happened, the hunting group's desire had faded. They really wanted to bring the ancestors back now, and let the people who had been away from home for hundreds of years return to the tribe. The ancestors must have been waiting for this day. But the hunting rules were there, and no one said that they had to bring forward the hunting schedule when they found the ancestors. The rules were passed down by the ancestors, and they did not dare to disobey. According to the hunting plan, they had to hunt outside for another 10 days or so before they could go back. Then they would meet up with the rest of the hunting group and go back to the tribe together. Of course, the big rules could not be changed, but the small rules could be changed freely. Mai could make the decision. Originally, the hunting range would be expanded, and the hunting area would be further away. Sometimes, they would stay outside for a few days when they were hunting in the second location. But now, he asked them to hunt near the second location, and some people had to stay behind to guard the cave every day. With the precedent of the thorn black wind, the hunting group was worried that other ferocious beasts would break in and destroy the ancestors' remains. Even though large ferocious beasts were rarely seen in this mountain, they still had to guard against the smaller ones and other accidents. Everyone agreed with Mai, and they took turns to guard the cave every day. Days went by. The hunting life was thrilling. Xiaofan, under the guidance of the seniors in the hunting group, had hunted a lot of good prey, enough for him to eat for 20 or 30 days. 5 days before the gathering day, Mai made the decision and asked everyone to go back. With the ancestors, they had to be more careful and spend more time. So, in order to meet up with the other hunting groups in time, they had to bring forward the hunting schedule. This time, when they went through the cave, it was very smooth, and no one was left behind. The people in the hunting group chopped the best wood, and made a simple sedan chair in Xiaofan's eyes. They used it to bring the ancestors home. They knew that when they returned to the tribe, their hunting group would have the least prey, but they did not care. There were still 3 thorn black winds in the first location. Besides, the most important thing was that they had found the 4 ancestors, and they felt very proud. Guarding the ancestors and bringing them back to the tribe might be the greatest honor in their lives. Death. But none. Regret. Plus equals. Thank you for all the tips and gifts. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.